Chapter 660. It was only a straight-line attack, but Yi Chen was still not satisfied. He pushed his soul power, and his sword finger drew an arc in the air before pulling back. Shoo! The emerald light was the same as Yi Chen's sword finger. After drawing an arc in the air, it pierced through the fake mountain for the second time. Its speed was so fast that it was only a little bit slower than a straight-line attack. Then, Yi Chen's sword finger kept on moving. The emerald light pierced through the fake mountain from different angles. No one knew how many times it had pierced through. Eventually, the fake mountain that looked like a hornet's nest could not handle the huge weight anymore and collapsed immediately. Come back! Yi Chen pulled his sword finger back, and the emerald light turned into a sword, which was put back into the scabbard. My soul power is 5 times more powerful than normal people. I have only trained the defensive sword spell to the 1st level, and I have already reached the 2nd level. Plus, my flying speed is even faster than Sidhu Hao's 2nd level, and my attacking power is even more powerful. I can basically control it like my own arm. If Sidhu Hao saw Yi Chen controlling the flying sword, he would definitely be shocked. If the 1st level was already better than his 2nd level, then wouldn't the 2nd level be even better? However, the 1st level is still the 1st level after all. Controlling the flying sword is still a bit stiff, and the turning is not natural enough. If I encounter a top warrior, I would be easily found out. After thinking about it, Yi Chen decided not to train the 2nd level for now. His soul power was very powerful, and there was still room for improvement in the 1st level. When he reached the point where he could no longer make any progress, then he would train the 2nd level of the defensive sword spell. The effect should be much better then. A couple of days had passed, and Yi Chen was improving every day. He had to admit that the defensive sword spell seemed to have been created just for him. With his powerful soul power, training the defensive sword spell was just a little bit harder than eating or drinking. Of course, this was only the 1st level, and the 2nd level would probably not be this easy. On this day, 4 young girls came to the Yi family. The girl on the left was about 25 or 26 years old. She was wearing a green dress and had a long sword on her waist. She looked very pretty, and her eyes were like cold stars. Looking closely, she even looked a bit similar to Yi Chen. Normally, people who looked a bit similar should be related by blood. The girl in green was none other than Yi Chen's 4th uncle's daughter, Yi Xian. Yi Chen's father, Yi Tianhao, and his 4th uncle Yi Wenhao already looked 50 to 60% similar. Therefore, their names were only 1 word apart. As the 4th uncle's daughter, it was not strange for Yi Xian to look a bit similar to Yi Chen. Yi Xian had reached the astral reaching realm last year, and was the 4th person in the Yi family to reach the astral reaching realm. The first one was Yi Chen, and the 2nd and 3rd were his parents. Before Yi Chen's rise, Yi Xian was the #1 martial genius of the Yi family, so it was natural for her to have this achievement. The 3 young women walking next to Yi Xian were all around 25 years old. The first one on the right was a woman in red. She had a beautiful face and a sexy body. There was a black whip wrapped around her waist, and when she walked, her body swayed in the wind, which was quite eye-catching. The second one on Yi Xian's right was not as pretty as Yi Xian and the girl in red, but she looked extra pretty. Her eyebrows were curved, and her eyes were watery. The first impression that she gave people was that she wanted to protect her, and not let her suffer even a little bit, as if it would be a huge sin to let her suffer. The third one was not any weaker than Yi Xian in terms of appearance. She looked a bit cold, but there was also a bit of arrogance in that coldness. She was the tallest one among the 4, and had a thin willow sword on her waist. The scabbard was decorated with tiny gemstones, which looked very bright. The first 3 were all at the early astral reaching realm, while the cold-looking girl was at the mid-astral reaching realm. I wonder if I can see your cousin this time. I have been here a couple of times already, and as long as I can see him, I will be satisfied. The red-clothed woman was filled with anticipation, but there was a trace of nervousness in her expression. She was like a shy girl who was about to see her sweetheart. If someone who was familiar with the red-clothed girl saw her like this, they would definitely be dumbfounded. This was because in the eyes of outsiders, the red-clothed girl had always been spoiled and unreasonable by nature. Yi Xian shook her head helplessly. These three were all her good friends, and they all had special backgrounds. The girl in red was called Di Hongyin, and she was the princess of the Red Moon Nation, a mid-ranked country in the South Rudra region. Her status was even higher than the head disciple of a rank 7 martial institution. The pretty-looking girl was Lan Tsuetsue, a young lady from a rank 7 family in the Sky Serpent Nation, who also had a high status. The one with the highest status was the cold-looking girl, Luo Baishuang. She was a top disciple from the rank 6 martial institution, the Sunset Martial School, and her cultivation was one small realm higher than theirs. Among the three, she had met Lan Tsuetsue first, and the friendship between the two was very pure. As for Di Hongyin and Luo Baishuang, it was only because of Yi Chen that they started to get to know each other. But as time went on, after going through a couple of life and death situations together, this impure friendship started to become pure as well. Otherwise, Yi Xian would not spend so much time with them and bring them to the Yi family as guests. But of course, friendship aside, when the three were with Yi Xian, they still talked about Yi Chen a lot. My cousin always goes to the Sky Martial region, and every time he goes, it would be for a long time. Even I have only seen him a couple of times. Yi Xian was not at home all the time, so she rarely saw Yi Chen. The Sky Martial region is a holy place for all the martial geniuses. Normal martial geniuses would not even have the right to go there. But your cousin is even more powerful. He is the #1 warrior just below the top 5 young warriors. He is the only young warrior in the master-level warrior ranking besides the top 5 young warriors. Di Hongyin could not help but think about it. If she knew that Yi Chen had already beaten Lu Xiaoyu, and Xia Hozuan had indirectly beaten Xiao Chuha, she would probably go crazy. Lan Tsuetsui blushed and said in a small voice, Yi Xian, can you take us to your cousin's yard for a look? No. Yi Xian rejected right away. In the Yi family, which one of them did not see Yi Chen as a legend? She was both respectful and scared of Yi Chen, so she would not dare to bring anyone into Yi Chen's yard. But I can take you to the Wind Pavilion. You can see my cousin's yard from there. Yi Xian said again. All right, take us there now. Di Hongyin said eagerly. The Wind Pavilion was one of the tallest buildings in the Yi family. It could look over half of the entire Yi family. Yi Chen's yard was the biggest in the Yi family. It was covered in green trees, blocking most of the buildings and bedrooms. However, the lake and the open space next to it were not blocked at all. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps were heard as Yi Xian and the other three arrived at the 9th floor of the pavilion. That is my cousin's yard. Yi Xian walked to the wide window and pointed at Yi Chen's yard. Strangely, the four suddenly quieted down, not even daring to breathe. In Chen Shi's field of vision, a blue-clothed young man was cultivating a unique sword technique at the side of the lake. With a point of his sword, an emerald-green ray of light shot out, and it fluttered and circled in the sky above the lake before drawing out a myriad of strands of light that were extremely beautiful and swift. This young man looked even younger than them, just in his early 20s. But everyone who had seen his picture would know that this was Yi Chen. He was 26 years old this year, and the reason why he looked so young was because he had reached the astral reaching realm when he was 19 and reached the seas of Soul's realm when he was 24. His appearance had been stagnant for many years, as if time could not do anything to him. Your cousin is at home. Di Hongyin covered her mouth while Lan Tsuetsue and Luo Baishuang's breathing increased. Yeah. Yi Xian nodded dumbly. To be honest, Yi Xian and Yi Chen did not have much contact with each other, since they were always out. It would be luck if they could run into each other in the Yi family, and it would only happen 2 or 3 times a year. Looking at Yi Chen from afar, Yi Xian did not know what she was feeling. Before Yi Chen's rise, her attitude towards Yi Chen was very cold. Although she was not as hostile towards him as Yi Tang and Yi Ming, she would not be too close to him either. Moreover, because of Ji Xuan, her relationship with Yi Chen was very tense. Back then, she did not care, because she was the #1 martial genius of the Yi family, and she was not on the same path as Yi Chen. However, since then, Yi Chen had started to rise. During the family gathering, Yi Chen shocked everyone and won the first place. At the banquet of the head disciple, young Master Emerald, he showed his brilliance and defeated the stone man Sher Patian. Then, in the Heaven Dream Ancient Place, he shocked the whole world and became the #1 martial genius of the 9 nations, beating down the head disciple, young Master Emerald, young Master North Snow from the North Snow Martial Academy and the other martial geniuses. All of a sudden, Yi Chen became the king, and no one dared to compete with him. If this was already shocking enough, then the next one would be a legend. In the Hidden Dragon rank competition that was held once every 3 years, Yi Chen had become a shining star. This star was even brighter than the sun, as he had beaten all the top martial geniuses that Yi Xian could not even imagine. He had stepped on their dead bodies and reached the top, becoming the #1 martial genius of the South Ridra region. Just when everyone thought that Yi Chen would stop there, he had become one of the top young warriors in the South Ridra region, just like Li Xiaoyun, Jing Aoshuan, and Chu Zhongtian. It was not over yet. In the new tea gathering, Yi Chen had finally won the first place, and had beaten the uninvited guest from the East region with his own power. Since then, Yi Chen had become known by everyone in the South Ridra region. He had become the leader of the martial geniuses, the legend of the whole South Ridra region. It was as if he would not give up until he scared people to death. What had happened before seemed to be just small fights for Yi Chen, and the stage was not big enough for him. He had come to the Sky Martial region as the #1 warrior of the young generation in the South Ridra region, starting a new journey and beginning a glorious life. In just a couple of years, he had become the #1 warrior just below the top 5 young warriors. He had become one of the most famous martial geniuses of the whole True Spirit continent. His fame could no longer be described by one region or one country, but by the whole continent, dozens of regions, and countless countries. Right then, Yi Chen was no longer a legend, but a myth. As a member of the Yi family, Yi Xian knew better than anyone else that everyone in the South Ridra region would want to get on Yi Chen's good side. Those rank 6 martial institutions were unbelievably powerful in the eyes of normal people, but a lot of people knew that as long as Yi Chen wanted to, he could destroy all of them in one night. Everyone in the South Ridra region was looking up at Yi Chen. He was not only the #1 warrior of the young generation, but also the king of the whole South Ridra region. Once the king was angry, everyone would tremble, including the top 4 countries, top 10 mid-sized countries, 36 small countries, and countless martial institutions. Because of Yi Chen, the Yi family and the Sky Cloud Martial School had a very high status in the whole South Ridra region. A lot of royal families hoped that their children could enter the Sky Cloud Martial School and become their disciples. Some of them even wanted their daughters to marry into the Yi family, even if it was a son of a concubine. If they could marry a direct descendant of the Yi family, it would be a blessing that they had cultivated for 8 lifetimes. Once they had a good relationship with the Yi family, all of the powerful forces in the whole South Ridra region would give them some face. Although the Yi family did not want to get involved with so many powerful forces, there would always be 1 or 2 exceptions. For example, there was a princess from a mid-sized country who married into the Yi family, and the little princess of the Windy Nation was also engaged to a direct descendant of the Yi family. The appearance of Yi Chen had saved thousands of years of hard work for the Yi family. Even the older generation had to respect and fear Yi Chen at the same time. It was a change brought about by power. Even if they were related by blood, it would still be useless. Within the Yi family, only the leader of the family, Yi Tianhao, had the closest relationship with Yi Chen, so it would not be affected too much. Yi Xian, can you introduce me to your cousin? The cold and arrogant Luo Baishuang suddenly said. Yi Xian came back to her senses and shook her head. Don't even think about it. My cousin already has a girlfriend and you all know her. It is Murong Qingqing. Then, I can be his concubine. Di Haomin was not willing to accept it. Right then, Yi Chen pointed out his finger, and his long sword returned to its scabbard. He turned his head and looked at the 9th floor of the Wind Pavilion. All of a sudden, all 4 of them stopped breathing. Chapter 661. If it were only a normal Sea of Souls realm warrior looking at them, they would not have stopped breathing, unless the warrior had done it on purpose. But Yi Chen had only casually glanced at them, and his expression was not cold at all. It was just like a senior looking at a junior. But the pressure of a senior was way too powerful. It was just a normal glance, but it had already numbed their bodies. If Yi Chen had done it on purpose, they might have been scared out of their wits. Yi Chen naturally did not do it on purpose. He had just finished training his defensive sword spell, so a wave of sword intent was still lingering. Even if it was just a strand of it, it was enough to make the 4 feel uncomfortable. After all, no one in the world could have such a powerful sword intent at the Sea of Souls realm. Plus, Yi Chen had accepted the title of Sword Master, so he had a kind of prestige that could not be violated. Yi Xian, is this your friend? Yi Chen had let go of some of his unhappiness a long time ago. Back then, Yi Xian was only a 14 or 15-year-old girl, and did not have any schemes. Not to mention Yi Xian, even his uncle Yi Batian had been forgotten by Yi Chen. As a sword master, one should not be calculative, but one should also be decisive in killing. One should know who was the enemy and who was not. As Yi Xian's cousin, if he did not care about them after noticing them, it would only hurt Yi Xian's feelings. Therefore, Yi Chen decided to ask about them. Indeed, a joyful expression flashed through Yi Xian's face as she nodded. Yes, cousin Yi Chen. Come here. Hearing him, the 4 jumped down from the Wind Pavilion and carefully arrived at Yi Chen's yard. Right then, even Di Hongyin, who was usually aggressive, seemed very cautious as well. Her small hands were holding onto the corner of her clothes. Luo Baishuang and Lan Tsuetsue's eyes were full of nervousness. Don't be nervous. I am about the same age as you guys. Yi Chen chuckled as the remaining sword intent disappeared completely. Of course I am nervous. Di Haomin mumbled to herself. Lan Tsuetsue asked carefully, Brother Yi, what kind of sword spell did you just train? Can your sword fly out? She didn't know how to address Yi Chen. Fortunately, she was 1 year younger than Yi Chen, so she just called him Big Brother Yi. Yi Chen said, This is the Imperial Sword technique. It requires soul power to control. Sword control technique? Yi Xian and the other 3 looked confused. They were unfamiliar with this sword art and had never heard of it before. Flying on a sword, taking a person's head from 1,000 miles away. You can understand it this way. After mastering the Imperial Sword technique, Yi Chen could already fly on his sword. Due to his powerful soul force, the speed of his flying sword was even faster than the sword light flight technique. This was because the speed of the flying sword was faster than most attacks, which was something that the sword light flight technique could not achieve at the moment. Hearing Yi Chen's words, the eyes of the 4 brightened, and an image naturally appeared in their minds. A peerless swordsman was riding on a flying sword, flying elegantly and fiercely. Without a doubt, the image of this swordsman was Yi Chen. It is very rare for you to be able to reach the astral reaching realm at such a young age. If your willpower is strong enough, it would not be impossible for you to reach the Sea of Souls realm. Yi Chen did not use the standard of the Sky Martial region to treat the 4, since those who could appear in the Sky Martial region were all insane martial geniuses. There might not even be 1 in 100 million. But in the South Rudra region, The 4 of them were already considered top martial geniuses, and it was not impossible for them to reach the Sea of Soul's realm. Willpower? Doesn't it need talent? Luo Baishuang asked. Yi Chen shook his head. Talent can help you reach the astral reaching realm, but reaching the Sea of Soul's realm will be extremely difficult. When you fail to make any progress for countless times, you will start to waver and lose your confidence. Then, you will be satisfied with your current cultivation and lose your ambition. Not having talent is not scary, but having your confidence shaken and having no ambition is the scariest thing. When your willpower is strong enough, then even if your talent is a bit weaker, it will still be okay, because once you reach the astral reaching realm, everyone will be on the same starting line. People with a strong willpower will have a much higher chance of success than geniuses with less confidence. The talent that Yi Chen mentioned was relative to their level. If it were those martial geniuses in the sky martial region, it would indeed be insane. Even if they did not have enough willpower, they would still be able to reach the Sea of Soul's realm. But, whether it was the Sea of Soul's realm or the astral reaching realm, one would still need the willpower in the end. Hearing him, Yi Xian and the other 3 seemed to be thinking about something. Besides Yi Xian, who knew a lot about Yi Chen in the beginning, Luo Baishuang and the other 2 had all heard about how Yi Chen was not that amazing at the beginning. Since he was able to achieve so much, he must have an unimaginable willpower. If Yi Chen were just an astral-reaching realm warrior like them, then they would not think that way. But, in their eyes, Yi Chen was a legend. Whatever he said, it would not be wrong. After that, Yi Chen taught them a little bit. Yi Xian and Luo Baishuang trained sword arts, so they did not know much about the last few top-rank Earth Realm sword arts. But, after Yi Chen's teaching, they were suddenly enlightened. On the other hand, Di Hongyin and Lan Tsuetsue trained a whip art and a palm art respectively. Yi Chen also taught them a little bit, and they learned no less than Yi Xian and Luo Baishuang. It should not be forgotten that Yi Chen was unrivaled in terms of martial arts training. Although he mainly trained sword arts, any martial arts he learned would be easy to master. Plus, top-rank Earth Realm martial arts were not as powerful as profound sense martial arts after all, which were way easier. As the days passed by, Yi Chen had soon trained to the peak of the first level of the defensive sword spell. Within 100 steps, he could cut off dozens of flies' wings with a single thought. On the other hand, Luo Baishuang and the other 2 rarely got to see Yi Chen in person, so they refused to leave the Yi family. Yi Xian could not get rid of them no matter how hard she tried. Of course, they did not dare to disturb Yi Chen too much. Every 3 to 4 days, they would only ask to see Yi Chen with the excuse of learning martial arts. To them, Yi Chen was already an extravagant hope, so it should not be a problem for them to see him. Just like that, a month had passed, and it was already late October. Yi Chen left the Yi family and flew towards the Murong family. Seeing that Yi Chen had left, Luo Baishuang and the other 2 finally felt too embarrassed to stay any longer, so they left together. The Yi family was not far from the Murong family, but it was still a few million miles away. On the way, Yi Chen passed by a big city in the Black Dragon Empire, the Black Line City. With a thought, Yi Chen directed his flying puppet to fly down. Inside the pavilion, there were a lot of warriors lining up in front of the gate. The second master-level warrior ranking had been released a week ago, and every day there would be a huge amount of people coming to buy it. The first day had the most people, and then the following days the number would decrease. It had only been a week, but if one wanted to buy the ranking, they would still have to line up. One had to admit that the ranking had already become a symbol of the whole true spirit continent. If one had not seen the ranking before, they would be too embarrassed to talk to others, since it would be very easy to be looked down upon. This year, there are indeed a lot of young warriors in the ranking. Shangguan Fei, Helian Wuhua, Situ Hao, Yen Fengfeng, Baiming Hui, Xiao Chuha, Lu Xiaoyu, Xia Hozuan, Duguju, Bai Wushu. So many. What? Yi Chen is ranked number 1, and his title is Sword Master. Yi Chen, Sword Master? Some of the people who had not bought it yet heard people mumbling. Their eyes widened as they dug their ears, thinking that they might be hearing things. Are you sure? Someone asked hurriedly. Of course I am. The number one is indeed Yi Chen, and his title is Sword Master. The person who was talking said with a bit of shock. Boss, give me a copy. All of a sudden, the area around the pavilion was heated up. Sword Master Yi Chen, the number one on the ranking. This news was just too shocking. Those who had not bought it yet were extremely anxious, wishing that they could go and grab one for themselves. Alright. Don't worry, everyone will get one. The owner of the pavilion was so busy that his forehead was covered in sweat. After queuing for a while, Yi Chen also managed to buy a master-level warrior ranking book. Before he left, someone noticed him and was immediately dumbfounded. However, when he came back to his senses, Yi Chen had already left. I think I just saw Yi Chen. High up in the sky, Yi Chen sat on his flying puppet. Flipping to the first page, Yi Chen saw his own name. Number 1 on the ranking, Sword Master Yi Chen. This person is a rare sword art martial genius. At the age of 26, he made it to the top of the ranking, and his title is Sword Master. On September 18th, he beat Lu Xiaoyu and Duguju, and on September 25th, he beat Xia Hozuan in the Turtle Mountain. After the evaluation of dozens of our elders, he has been ranked as the number 1 on the ranking, and his title is Sword Master. This title is still to be decided, but we all think that the title will definitely belong to him. The pavilion had a very high evaluation for Yi Chen, and their tone was very certain. He actually called me Sword Master? Yi Chen was a bit surprised. Gao Changtian calling him Sword Master was just giving him a title, which was different from the pavilion calling him Sword Master. At least, the latter would be more powerful than the former. So, whether or not the leader of the pavilion was involved would be a mystery. Without paying too much attention to it, Yi Chen continued to flip to the back. There were indeed a lot of young warriors in the ranking this time. There were 17 of them, which was close to 1/4 of the ranking. It was quite a high ratio. Among them, Duguju was ranked 4th, the Axe Master was 2nd, Su Yuan was 3rd, Xie Baiting was 6th, and Bai Wuxue was still the 7th. The title of Sword Master has landed on me just like that. It seems like I will have to work hard. Closing the book, Yi Chen smiled lightly. This is ridiculous. What is wrong with the pavilion? They put our headmaster in 2nd place? What right does that Yi Chen have to be at the top? In the surreal martial school, a lot of the disciples were very upset, and some of the elders looked angry as well. Inside the headmaster's palace, the Axe Master Lin Ruhai closed his book, Sword Master. I am afraid it will not be for long. Those old guys are not easy to deal with. They don't care about the ranking, but the title of Sword Master is something they have to care about. As the headmaster of the surreal martial school, it is not appropriate for me to make a move, but it is not necessary for me to make a move either. In the middle of a mountain of swords, a white-haired elder slowly spat out a mouthful of white mist. The mist was like a blade, flashing across the sky like a piece of white silk. Crack! A mountain that was as straight as a sword had been cut in half, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. It seems like after a long time, the martial world no longer cares about us. They even gave us the title of Sword Master so easily. The white-haired elder had a calm look in his eyes. Every move he made, the plants around him would shake, as if they were sharp swords. If any sword artist came here, they would definitely be terrified. Chapter 662. As soon as the 2nd ranking was released, the whole True Spirit continent was shocked. No one had expected Yi Chen to be ranked 1st, since the former 1st and 2nd rankers, Axe Master Lin Ruhai and Earth Sword Master Su Yuan, were not to be trifled with. For a young man who was not even 30 years old to push them down, it would be too exaggerated. If being ranked 1st in the ranking was exaggerated, then the title of Sword Master would be ridiculous. If it were just saying that Yi Chen was the sword master, it would still be acceptable. However, an organization as big as the Knowledge Pavilion had unanimously agreed that Yi Chen was the sword master. If this was not ridiculous, then what was? Therefore, a lot of people started to doubt the accuracy of the Knowledge Pavilion. As for whether they were right or not, it would be revealed soon. Those famous sword artists of their eras would not be indifferent to the title of Sword Master. The challenge that Yi Chen would have to face would be very serious. When Yi Chen arrived at the Murong family, Murong Qingqing had just come out of seclusion for a couple of days. Her wounds had already been healed. Although she had to train for half a year to recover, it was not without its benefit. Because her body had been wounded by the demonic power essence, it had strengthened her demonic body to the third step. In terms of physical defense, it was even more powerful than Yi Chen's third step spirit body. In addition, Murong Qingqing had also refined a huge amount of demonic power essence, allowing her cultivation to skyrocket. She had successfully broken through to Late Sea of Soul Realm, which was one step ahead of Yi Chen. However, this breakthrough had also depleted the demonic power essence inside her body. She was afraid that she would only be able to reach half-step king warrior level at most. Once that happened, she would have to rely on herself. The demonic power in the true spirit continent was extremely rare, and it would be several times more difficult for her to reach life and death realm. With her demonic body reaching the third step and her cultivation reaching Late Sea of Soul Realm, Murong Qingqing's power had increased by several fold. Before, using the Sky Demon Finger would be a huge burden, but now she could use it dozens of times in a row without any problem. Moreover, during her breakthrough to Late Sea of Soul Realm, Murong Qingqing had experienced the state of being one with the world for a short period of time. Her few profound sense martial arts had all reached 80% completion, and her dark sky curtain had also reached completion, increasing its defensive power. She had already started to think about creating her own profound sense martial art. This was a black ocean that stretched as far as the eye could see. The waves surged. The sea was dotted with islands. Basically, there would be an island every few hundred or thousand kilometers. Looking down from above, one could see that the Black Sea was densely packed with islands. It was dozens of times denser than the surrounding seas. There were even people mining resources on some of the islands. The miners on the southern island had a simple dragon pattern embroidered on their clothes. It was only a few strokes, but it gave off a majestic aura. However, the miners on the northern island did not have the same pattern embroidered on their clothes. Some had a black octopus, some had a gale pattern, some had a whirlpool pattern, and some had a giant eagle pattern. Their cultivation was not high, and they were basically all at the condensing reality realm. Xiao 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 from the south, densely packed figures shot over. As they got closer and closer, they could see that they were all wearing azure robes with a huge dragon pattern embroidered on them. The people living in this area knew very well that these people were the people of Dragon God Celestial Palace's Azure Dragon Hall. Azure Dragon Hall was the head of the 5 great halls, and its overall strength was the highest. Stop! The leader was tall and sturdy, with tiger-like eyes and thick eyebrows. He carried a huge blade on his back, the hilt of which was as long as an arm. He was the deputy leader of the Azure Dragon Hall, Huanhai. His cultivation base was at the peak of Late Sea of Soul Realm, and his strength was not much weaker than the leader of the Yellow Dragon Hall, Zhang Jingguang. This time, he had led hundreds of people here because he had received a message. The enemy force, Whirlwind Gate, would be escorting a batch of resources through this area. What they needed to do was to kill the enemy and seize the resources. Everyone, spread out and prepare for the ambush. Wait for my command and attack. Don't let a single one escape. Huanhai said loudly. Yes. Among these hundreds of people, there were more than 30 Sea of Souls Realm warriors. Among them, 15 were at Early Sea of Souls Realm, 10 were at Mid Sea of Souls Realm, and 7 were at Late Sea of Soul's realm. The rest were all astral-reaching realm warriors. With such a powerful force, it would be enough to wipe out all of the rank 6 martial institutions in the whole South Rudra region. Deputy Hu, will there be any danger? A gloomy middle-aged man walked out from Hu Wenhai's side. This person was the former deputy of Yellow Dragon Hall, Yao Yifeng. After Yao Yifeng was captured by Zhang Zhenguang, he was sent to Dragon God's Celestial Palace. Since Dragon King was already in seclusion at that time, and the 4 great powers were getting restless, the upper echelons of Dragon God's Celestial Palace allowed Yao Yifeng to atone for his crimes with meritorious service, and sent him to Blood Battle Ocean to temporarily join Azure Dragon Hall. Of course, the upper echelons of Dragon God's Celestial Palace were also afraid that Yao Yifeng would harbor resentment and do something bad to the palace. Therefore, although they removed the yellow dragon sealing great art from his body, they also added another restriction. This restriction wouldn't affect his strength, but could control him. As long as he dared to rebel, the restriction would activate, and he would immediately die without a burial. After joining Azure Dragon Hall, Yao Yifeng didn't make any abnormal movements. He fought a few bloody battles and killed many enemies, which made the upper echelons of Dragon God's Celestial Palace feel relieved. Originally, he was only a combat attendant of Azure Dragon Hall, but now, he was promoted to a chief attendant. Once Dragon God's Celestial Palace completely trusted him, it wouldn't be impossible for him to be promoted to a deputy. Hu Wenhai waved his hand. This operation is extremely secretive. Less than 5 people know about it in advance. So, don't worry. It's absolutely safe. Only the hall master and a few deputies knew about this kind of top-secret operation. Even chief attendants didn't have the qualifications to know. It's best if it's absolutely safe. Our Dragon God Celestial Palace's losses have been too disastrous. A cold light flickered in Yao Yifeng's eyes as he sighed. They'll pay a disastrous price. Hu Wenhai's expression was fierce. The ambush was quickly carried out. In a short while, not a single Azure Dragon Hall member could be seen. Gales blew past, and the seawater surged violently. Time passed slowly. After an unknown amount of time, the Azure Dragon Hall members hiding in the seawater or on the islands gradually became anxious. Why aren't they here yet? Could it be that they've found out? Don't jinx it. Sweat, I'm just saying. Don't take it seriously. Another short while passed. Suddenly, screams resounded. Not good, we've been counter-ambushed. In the sky and in the sea, densely packed figures surrounded them. At a glance, the number of people on each side was not much less than theirs. Added together, it was more than 3 times their number. Once they were surrounded, it was very likely that none of them would be able to escape. Impossible. How did they know? Hu Wenhai turned pale with fright. Since they couldn't easily release their soul power during the ambush, it would be tantamount to telling others that they were lying in ambush. Therefore, the enemies were only seen dozens of li away. Almost subconsciously, Hu Wenhai activated his soul power and spread it out. Within his soul power perception, there were enemies in every direction. There were Whirlwind Gate, Black King Gate, Sky Eagle Cult, and Water Wave Sect. The speed of these 4 sides was extremely fast. In a few blinks, they were still dozens of li away, but in a few blinks, they were already less than 20 li away. Operation failed. Break out at full force. Hu Wenhai made a prompt decision and roared. Walala! Azure Dragon Hall's forces gathered in 4 directions. Under Hu Wenhai's lead, they charged toward the southeast like a sharp blade. Can you escape? Kill! An ominous glint appeared in the leader's eyes. With a wave of his hand, countless attacks rained down on Azure Dragon Hall's forces. The speed of the attacks was much faster than their flying speed. In the next instant, the outermost forces of Azure Dragon Hall were torn apart. Roughly speaking, the number of casualties was no less than 50. And this was just the first round of attacks. If there were a few more rounds, the consequences would be unimaginable. Kill our way out. Hu Wenhai's eyes were bloodshot. Right in front of him was the water wave sect. Kill! Killing one is one, killing two is a profit. Boom! 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 Azure Dragon Hall's forces' eyes were all bloodshot. The outermost forces raised their shields one after another, blocking the attacks from the right, left, and rear. Then, all of them began to circulate their Zhen Yuan, sending waves of Zhen Yuan toward the water wave sect. Formation: Water Curtain Skyflower. The majority of water wave sects people cultivated water-attributed martial arts. In the ocean, they were always successful. The leader of water wave sect formed seals with both hands, and the people behind him also did the same. In the next instant, a huge water wall condensed in front of them. It was several thousand meters long, several thousand meters tall, and 100 meters thick, blocking the attacks from the Azure Dragon Hall's forces. The water wall was in tatters. It was constantly being destroyed and repaired, but it didn't collapse. Yao Yifeng, Zhuaheng, Xiang Yihue, the six of you, work with me to break through the water wall and kill our way into water wave sect's forces. Hu Wenhai knew that only by killing his way into the enemy's midst would there be any hope of breaking out. Otherwise, they would be wrapped up like dumplings sooner or later. All right, the others replied solemnly. Mad Wave Chop, Blazing Spear. 7 attacks landed on the water wall, and it finally exploded, turning into thousands of water pillars that shot out in all directions. Charge! Hu Wenhai took the lead and charged. The machete in his hand emitted a huge white blade aura that was unstoppable. Hee, Hu Wenhai, you're dead for sure this time. The water wave sect's forces gathered together. Facing the Azure Dragon Hall's assault, they were disdainful. If they couldn't even kill their opponents like this, they might as well commit suicide. Rumble! A huge water ball condensed and shot toward Hu Wenhai and the Azure Dragon Hall's forces behind him. At this moment, Yao Yifeng, intentionally or not, dashed to the right, dodging the water ball's attack. Pung! The combined attack from hundreds of water wave sect's forces was too fierce. Hu Wenhai was the first to fall, blasted into pieces, while the Azure Dragon Hall's forces behind him had lost at least a third of their forces. As for the remaining, they were falling one after another. They simply couldn't block the combined attack of the other 3 forces. Follow me, charge out! Yao Yifeng led the remaining dozens of people and broke out of the water wave sect's encirclement. After losing half of their forces, they actually succeeded. Chapter 663. Not only did we kill a large number of Azure Dragon Hall's people, we even killed Azure Dragon Hall's deputy, Hu Wenhai. The people of the 4 sects didn't chase after Yao Yifeng's group. Instead, they all stopped and laughed heartily. The leader of Water Wave sect smiled. In these few years, the number of Dragon God Celestial Palace's people who died in our hands should be more than 1,000. I'd like to see how long Dragon God Celestial Palace can last. Let's see whether they nurture experts faster or we kill them faster. 5th grade sects nurtured astral-reaching experts dozens of times faster than 6th grade sections. It should be known that a 6th grade sect had tens of thousands of people, from elders to janitor disciples. Meanwhile, a 5th grade sect would have hundreds of thousands of people. A peak 5th grade sect like Dragon God Celestial Palace already had more than 1 million people. As long as there were enough resources, astral-reaching experts would be endless, and Sea of Soul Realm experts could be easily produced as well. After all, those who could enter 5th grade sects were all geniuses with decent innate talent. The ratio of experts produced by 5th grade sects was extremely high. However, 5th grade sects also had a limit. If their experts continued to die like this, it wouldn't take more than a few years for their vitality to be greatly damaged. In less than 10 years, there would be a gap between the younger generation and the younger generation. Once a gap appeared, it would be a sign of decline. We can only blame Dragon God Celestial Palace for being too powerful. Our four sects only occupy 40% of Eastern Shallow Ocean's resources, while Dragon God's Celestial Palace occupies 50%. In the long run, we'll never be able to catch up to Dragon God's Celestial Palace. We don't have as many experts either. The leader of Whirlwind Gate caressed the blade in his hand, his gaze cold. All right, this encirclement is over. Dragon God's Celestial Palace has suffered a disastrous loss. I don't think they'll make any big movements in the near future. Let's go back and report. Sky Eagle Cult's people left in the sky. Soon after, Water Wave Sect, Black King Gate, and Whirlwind Gate's people also left, leaving behind a blood-dyed ocean and hundreds of mutilated corpses. Several thousand li away, Yao Yifeng and dozens of Azure Dragon Hall's experts who had just escaped from death stopped. Damn it! Where did these bastards get the news? How did we get ambushed instead? Even the deputy is dead. An Azure Dragon Hall expert roared with a hoarse voice. Someone must have leaked it. Otherwise, the news wouldn't have leaked. If I find out who leaked the secret, I'll definitely make him die a horrible death. A strange look flashed in Yao Yifeng's eyes. He said in a deep and sorrowful voice, "Only the Hall Master and the Deputy Hall Masters know about this kind of secret operation. I think the possibility of them snitching is very low." Hall Master, Vice Hall Master? Hearing this, everyone fell silent. They trusted the Azure Dragon Hall leader, but they had doubts about the Vice Hall leaders. After all, the Azure Dragon Hall had lost too many people this time, which was equivalent to 1/7 of the Azure Dragon Hall's total manpower. If this happened a few more times, the Azure Dragon Hall would probably only exist in name. When I return this time, I will make a trip to the Heavenly Palace's headquarters and get the Elders' Assembly to send people to investigate the Azure Dragon Palace and find the mole. Right. If we do not find out who the mole is, the people of the Azure Dragon Palace will not be at ease. Yi Chen stayed at the Murong family for a week. During this time, besides enjoying the world with Murong Qingqing, he would occasionally spar with Murong Qingqing, pointing out her weaknesses in battle. Because of his powerful soul power, Yi Chen could easily sense some of the details. He knew how to get the upper hand and suppress the opponent. In this aspect, no one could compete with him. Her profound sense martial arts had improved drastically, and Murong Qingqing just happened to be lacking an opponent to train with. After 1 week, her battling power had increased steadily, and she might even be a bit more powerful than Bai Minghui now. If she were to rearrange the master-level warrior ranking, she would at least be in the top 20. During the spar with Murong Qingqing, Yi Chen did not just sit around either. His main sword spell had already reached the 2nd level. With just a thought, he would be able to control his flying sword to kill his enemies. Within 300 steps, it would be no different from within 10 steps. Even Murong Qingqing, who had an amazing speed talent, would have a hard time avoiding Yi Chen's flying sword. In terms of killing speed, it was twice as fast as the spiritual sword. After 1 week, Yi Chen had returned to the Yi family, while Murong Qingqing had calmed down and started to create her own profound sense martial art. In the sky, a white satin-like light flashed past. It was as sharp as a sword, looking like an illusionary flying sword. The white light arrived in the sky above the Windy Nation. A small nation, a small family, and yet, a rare sword art genius has been born. It is indeed not easy. But, the tallest tree in the forest will be blown away by the wind. It is not a good thing for a young man to not know how to be reserved. Let me teach him a lesson. The white light paused for a second before increasing its speed again, flying toward the Misty Mountain. Misty Mountain, Yi family. Yi Chen was teaching a disciple of the Yi family. This Yi family disciple was none other than Yi Xiaoshui, who had given Yi Chen the inspiration and helped him complete his gold pattern. Although Yi Xiaoshui's cultivation talent was ordinary, his sword art talent was quite good. Last time, the Sky Water Sword spell that Yi Chen had given him, he had already trained to the 6th movement. The first 5 movements were all 60 to 70% complete, and the 6th movement was also 50% complete. While watching Yi Xiaoshui practice, Yi Chen said, "Soft sword art can confuse the enemy, making them unable to see the sword's trajectory. But, no matter if it is soft sword art or any other sword art, it should not be flashy without any substance. Your sword art is not bad, but it is still a bit superficial." The Lu Sky Water Sword spell focuses on 3 words: softness, entanglement, and ruthlessness. You have achieved softness, but entanglement and ruthlessness are still a bit lacking. Entanglement requires you to use softness, and ruthlessness is the ultimate form, like a whirlpool, devouring the enemy. Yi Xiaoshui regarded Yi Chen as a legend, so he listened very carefully and learned very seriously. He could feel that although his sword art did not improve substantially, he still had a high chance of winning against an opponent at the same level. This was the difference between sword art attainments and actual combat. Yi Chen's on-the-spot teaching could at least save him a lot of hard work. "Alright, that's enough." Yi Chen suddenly stopped Yi Xiaoshui and looked at the sky. In the sky, a beam of white light was flying straight over. The sharp sword qi resonated with the sky, as if it had become one with the sky. This person. Yi Xiaoshui held his breath, and his skin felt cold. Master Sky Sword. Yi Chen did not need to guess to know who it was. Among the top swordsmen of the older generation, Master Sky Sword, Master Blood Sword, and Master Demon Sword were the most famous. These sword masters had different styles. Master Blood Sword's sword art was cruel and merciless, bloody and murderous. Master Demon Sword's sword art was strange and unpredictable. Master Sky Sword's sword art was even more amazing. It was like a great pressure, unstoppable. Without a doubt, this person was Master Sky Sword. The white light's speed was extremely fast, and it soon arrived in the sky above Yi Chen's courtyard. It was a white-haired old man. His clothes fluttered as he gently landed on the lakeside, standing beside a large tree. The white-haired old man sized up Yi Chen and was slightly surprised. He could see that Yi Chen carried a great momentum, and this momentum was different from his own. It was a kind of pressure that came from the unseen. Connecting this with the previous incident, the white-haired old man was sure that this was the other party's sword sect momentum. It has only been a few days, and he already has the sword sect momentum. The white-haired old man frowned slightly. A person's faith was very terrifying. Some bodhisattvas in temples were clearly inanimate objects, but after receiving a lot of worship, they could produce some strange things and gradually gain spirituality. Of course, this spirituality did not mean that it was omnipotent and could satisfy the wishes of the believers. It could only allow the sincere believers to have pure thoughts and not have any distracting thoughts. This was what was known as faith nourishment. The title of Sword Sect was the #1 title under Sword King. Since ancient times, it had been an incomparably glorious title. The significance it represented was very great. Accepting the title of Sword Sect would give one the Sword Sect momentum, and other swordsmen would be suppressed if they encountered it. Good, not bad. You are Yi Chen? The white-haired old man slowly exhaled, his eyes shining. Yi Chen nodded. You are Master Sky Sword, right? This old man is. Master Sky Sword cleared his throat and said, the title of Sword Sect has not been obtained by anyone for hundreds of years. Do you know why? Yi Chen knew some of the reasons, but he still said, I'd like to hear the details. Before entering life and death realm, Sword Sect is the ultimate glory of a sword artist. For hundreds of years, it's not that there hasn't been a #1 sword artist. On the contrary, there have been them all the time. However, none of them dared to call themselves Sword Sect, because no sword artist could hold onto the title forever. Not being able to hold onto the title is a humiliation to the Sword Sect. Therefore, it's still too early for you to call yourself Sword Sect. I didn't inform anyone this time, and I don't want to bully the weak. How about this? Hand over the title of sword sect, and I won't make things difficult for you. Yi Chen smiled. My view is different from yours. The reason why there hasn't been a sword sect for hundreds of years is not because those people thought they couldn't hold onto the title, but because they lacked courage and responsibility. Without even this bit of courage, even if they had the strength, they wouldn't be worthy of being a sword sect. The so-called sword sect is both internal and external. One must have both strength and courage. Since they have strength and courage, why can't they be called sword sect? Master Sky Sword's eyes narrowed. Seems like words are useless. Since you think you have the strength, I'll have to wake you up. Please enlighten me. I'll make sure you return empty-handed. Yi Chen wasn't the slightest bit intimidated by the opponent's name. In his eyes, the opponent was only a powerful sword artist, and he was a sword sect. This is the first time I've seen such an arrogant youngster. Master Sky Sword laughed out of extreme anger. With a wave of his hand, several leaves suddenly flew out from a nearby tree. These leaves revolved around his palm, and with a flick of his wrist, the leaves flew out. As the saying went, even a flying flower or a plucked leaf could injure the enemy. Swish, swish, swish. These leaves were no longer ordinary leaves. Not only did they contain Master Sky Sword's formidable Zhen Yuan and sword intent, but they also contained a unique profound. Without any exaggeration, these leaves could instantly kill an ordinary master. Moreover, this was only Master Sky Sword's initial probing. Buzz. Yi Chen's body remained motionless. Suddenly, a golden ripple blossomed around his body, shattering the invading leaves. Chapter 664. Sky Sword Style, White Flood Dragon. Master Sky Sword faintly creased his brows. The golden ripples emitting from Yi Chen's body gave him a misconception, as if the latter would pounce on him at any moment and brazenly attack. Raising his index and middle fingers, Master Sky Sword slashed in the air, and a white silk-like sword chi shot out. This sword chi extended and extended indefinitely, looking like a small white flood dragon shrouded in white light. Draw your sword! As he spoke, another golden ripple burst out from Yi Chen's body. The ripple was extremely powerful, and when the white flood dragon's sword chi came into contact with it, it immediately created thousands of sparks. Then, its direction changed, bypassing Yi Chen's body and shooting into the center of the lake. Rumble! The lake undulated up and down, and shortly after, a water column hundreds of meters thick erupted, erupting thousands of meters into the sky. When it fell, the entire cloud mist mountain seemed to be raining. Looking at the lake again, the water level had dropped by dozens of meters, almost completely drained. Good, worthy of being a sword prodigy that only appears once in 1,000 years. To be able to research such a strange protective chi. How could Master Sky Sword not see that Yi Chen was using his body as a sword, releasing a move that was somewhere between offense and defense? This move not only had a powerful offensive power, but it also had a divergent effect. Any attack that approached would be weakened by 30%, and then pushed away by the divergent force, deviating from its direction. The path of the sword is like rowing a boat against the current. If you don't move forward, you will fall back. I am improving at every moment, so I dare to call myself Sword Master. Yi Chen stretched out his hand, and the rain in the sky suddenly converged, turning into a water dragon, pouring back into the lake, filling it up again. Hearing this, Master Sky Sword suddenly felt a little regretful. He didn't have any great enmity with Yi Chen, nor did he have any gratitude towards Yi Chen. This time, he had come here purely because he was dissatisfied that the title of Sword Master had been given to a young man. He could tolerate being forgotten by the world, but he couldn't tolerate the title of Sword Master being tarnished. In his eyes, the title of Sword Master was sacred, and it was precisely because of this that he couldn't tolerate the slightest bit of impurity. However, after exchanging blows with Yi Chen, he discovered that compared to the information he had obtained, Yi Chen was indeed much stronger. If he had known that Yi Chen's potential was so strong and was improving at every moment, he might have considered it. Of course, regardless of whether he regretted it or not, the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring, and it had to be released. As long as he could defeat Yi Chen, this trip would not be in vain. Clang! Grandmaster Heavenly Sword unsheathed his sword, and as soon as it was unsheathed, it brought with it a sharp murderous aura as it attacked Yi Chen. As the sword slashed out, the space in front of it distorted, and the multicolored light made people feel as if they had entered an illusory realm. This is my residence. Let's go to the sky. Yi Chen didn't receive the attack. He bent his knees and turned into a flash of sword light as he soared into the sky, narrowly avoiding Grandmaster Heavenly Sword's attack. Pop! Grandmaster Heavenly Sword's sword chi was extremely condensed. Although its destructive power was great, its area of destruction was not wide, so it only left behind an unfathomably deep black hole at the lakeside. Seeing that Yi Chen had left, Grandmaster Heavenly Sword waved his sleeves, and a white light surged out. His body turned illusory and real, and he chased after Yi Chen like a white silk. Who? After the two of them left, Yi Xiaoshui, who was several hundred meters away, panted heavily as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Wiping off his cold sweat, he raised his head with a pale complexion and looked at the two people chasing after him in the sky. Too strong, 100 times stronger than me, 1,000 times stronger. Just a random wisp of their aura can make me feel like I'm close to death. If I can be 1/10 as strong as them in this life, my life will not be in vain. No, I might not be able to see a battle of this level in my lifetime. Even if I can't understand it, it can still broaden my horizons and improve my state of mind. I can't miss it. Grandmaster Heavenly Sword and Yi Chen had already disappeared into the eastern horizon. Yi Xiaoshui gritted his teeth and chased after them at full speed. After leaving the Yi family, he soared into the sky and doubled his speed. After a cup of tea's time, Yi Xiaoshui finally saw the figures of Yi Chen and Grandmaster Heavenly Sword in a small mountain range. At this time, this mountain range, which was used as a training ground for the Yi family's descendants, was already riddled with holes. Sword scars covered a large area, sharp and narrow, and the sword intent was still lingering. Because of the distance, Yi Xiaoshui couldn't even see the appearance and movements of the two clearly, but this was enough. In the sky above the mountain range, the two figures constantly clashed, and sparks flew everywhere. Sky sword style, sky cleaving. After another collision, Grandmaster Heavenly Sword used the momentum to fly above Yi Chen, and then he and his sword became one, slashing down. Before the sword arrived, the majestic and condensed sword pressure split the center of the mountain range in half, leaving a clear sword scar that was hundreds of meters deep. An extreme speed sword. Yi Chen almost couldn't catch the trajectory of this sword. Raising his center of gravity, Yi Chen raised his sword to meet the attack, using the spiritual sword. Dang! The two, one above and one below, their swords collided. Buzz! With the two as the center, circles of spatial ripples spread out, and the air became as viscous as mercury, incomparably heavy. Even time seemed to stop. Yi Xiaoshui, who was dozens of miles away, also felt that time had become much longer, and his thinking speed had decreased. Rumble! After the extreme silence, an earth-shattering explosion rang out, and the shock wave crazily swept out. The tall peaks in the mountain range were all blown off, and a layer of them was shaved off. All the demonic beasts were bleeding from the 7 apertures of their heads, and died. Fortunately, there was usually no one here, or else it would have led to a tragedy. Grandmaster Heavenly Sword and Yi Chen separated upon contact, and both retreated. However, Yi Chen only retreated a few hundred steps before recovering, while Grandmaster Heavenly Sword kept retreating, unable to control his momentum. Thunder Devour! Withstanding the remaining shockwave, Yi Chen's body streaked across the sky like a sword light, and a sword carrying a silver thunderball smashed toward Grandmaster Heavenly Sword. A destructive aura filled the sky. Heavenly Sword style, sword array. Grandmaster Heavenly Sword's face was filled with shock. 18 Jin Yuan long swords rushed out of his body, forming a sword array, and its power increased by several times as it faced Yi Chen. Kacha! The silver thunder ball and the sword array collided, and the sky suddenly lost its color. Only silver lightning and sword chi could be seen flying everywhere, as if it was the end of the world. Such a huge commotion couldn't have gone unnoticed. From all directions, people could be seen rushing over from time to time. In the northwest were people from Yi family and South Rudra sect, and in other directions there were also people from the pugilistic world. In a short period of time, all the people nearby had arrived. There were no less than 1,000 people, and it seemed like the situation was getting more and more intense. Xiao Shui, what's going on? Yi Tianhao and Xin Yuqing came together, and behind them was a large group of people from Yi family. There were Yi family elders, Yi family members, and Yi family disciples. There were at least 300 to 400 people. Yi Xiaoshui cupped his fists and said respectfully, "Family leader, mistress." Soon after, he told them everything he knew. "Grandmaster Heavenly Sword, I've heard of him. He was one of the top sword artists 100 years ago. I didn't expect him to be the one fighting Chen Er." Yi Tianhao frowned. "Will Chen Er be in danger?" Xin Yuqing said worriedly. Yi Tianhao shook his head slightly. "It seems like they are evenly matched. Moreover, doesn't Chen Er know the defensive sword art? He hasn't used it yet, so he should have some confidence in himself." Although Grandmaster Heavenly Sword shocked Yi Tianhao, he trusted Yi Chen, so Yi Tianhao didn't think there would be any problem. A martial artist's potential had a limit. Although Grandmaster Heavenly Sword was one of the top sword artists 100 years ago, without any fortuitous encounter, he would be stuck at this level for the rest of his life. The younger one was, the higher the cultivation base, the better. This way, it would be easier to break through one's original realm. After 100 years, there was basically no hope. Even stepping into half-step king realm was an extravagant hope. Otherwise, the number of kings on True Spirit continent would increase by at least 10 times. That's true. Xin Yuqing let out a sigh of relief. They knew a thing or two about the defensive sword art. As far as they were concerned, it was simply a miraculous skill. Who's fighting Yi Chen? This person is so powerful. He can actually fight evenly with Yi Chen. Yi Chen is number 1 on the Master's ranking, titled Grandmaster Sword. The Master's ranking doesn't record experts above the age of 250. Could this person be over 250 years old? Could he be a famous sword artist in the past? There weren't many who recognized Grandmaster Heavenly Sword. They couldn't be blamed for being ignorant. The main reason was that Grandmaster Heavenly Sword had retired for a long time, and there weren't many who recognized him. Some well-informed people vaguely understood the cause and effect. This white-haired old man had certainly come for the title of Grandmaster Sword. Only the title of Grandmaster Sword could make these old monsters make a move. "Yi Chen, I'm going all out." Grandmaster Heavenly Sword didn't intend to drag things out. "Bring it on." Yi Chen prepared himself. Sky sword style, star beheading sword. The autumn water longsword was raised high, and the sky above the mountain range suddenly darkened. One after another, flickering star phantoms appeared out of nowhere. Grandmaster Heavenly Sword's white hair fluttered in the wind as he furiously slashed down. All the star phantoms shattered one after another, as if a single sword had shattered countless stars. Golden hurricane! At the same time as the stars shattered, a golden ripple rapidly extended, as if a golden river had split the starry sky into two. Bang! The violent explosion caused the heaven and earth to shake and space to distort. The area where the two were standing turned fuzzy, and everything was stretched and distorted. The next moment, a resplendent radiance erupted like a star exploding, accompanied by golden specks. Grandmaster Heavenly Sword sucked in a deep breath and pushed his protective Jin Yuan to the limit. His entire being was sent flying, and as he flew, golden specks would fall on his protective Jin Yuan from time to time, producing countless sparks and loud clangs. Every time a loud clang rang out, Grandmaster Heavenly Sword's complexion would turn a shade paler. Yi Chen's situation was more or less the same as Grandmaster Heavenly Sword. He had a half-step supreme grade defensive armor, and so did Grandmaster Heavenly Sword. The difference was that Grandmaster Heavenly Sword didn't have a dragon bone defense, and so his blood and chi suffered some damage, causing his complexion to turn pale. On the other hand, Yi Chen was much more relaxed, and was only sent flying by the resplendent radiance. Grandmaster Heavenly Sword, if you stop here, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. While retreating, Yi Chen was still able to speak. After a few blinks of an eye, Grandmaster Heavenly Sword calmed his blood and replied, "You and I are about the same. I can't defeat you, and you can't defeat me." He had no choice but to admit that he couldn't defeat Yi Chen with his strength, and this shocked him greatly. According to the information he had obtained, Yi Chen's strength hadn't been this strong during the battle with Duguju. It had only been a few days, yet his strength had improved to a certain extent. "I'm afraid not." As he spoke, Yi Chen pointed out with his left hand, and the emerald longsword at his waist automatically unsheathed. With a flicker of sword light, it instantly arrived before Grandmaster Heavenly Sword. Under his horrified gaze, the emerald longsword pierced through his protective Jin Yuan and slashed at his armor. Puff! Spurting out blood, Grandmaster Heavenly Sword retreated once more, his eyes filled with fear. Chapter 665. What kind of sword art is this? Controlling a sword to kill the enemy? After all, not many people knew about the sword control art. In a small nation like Windy Nation, the number of people who knew about it was even fewer. Sword control art. With a slap of his palm, a mountain peak shattered. Master Sky Sword also seized this opportunity to stop his figure, his eyes rigidly staring at the flying sword in the sky. "Not bad," Yi Chen indifferently said. "Your sword control art has already been cultivated to the highest realm?" As an older generation sword artist, Master Sky Sword couldn't possibly not know about the sword control art. The reason why this sword art was so famous was mainly because once it was cultivated, any ordinary sword artist could instantly become a peak sword artist. Therefore, it was highly revered and even deified. However, Master Sky Sword knew that although the sword control art was powerful, it could only make one a peak sword artist. It was impossible for one to be invincible. The defensive sword art also had its flaws, and that was, it couldn't grow along with the growth of its master. Using the defensive sword art at early Sea of Soul Realm would have the same might as using it at mid-Sea of Soul Realm. It was closely related to soul power, and only with the growth of soul power could it grow. Therefore, even though Master Sky Sword knew that the defensive sword art had reappeared, he didn't care too much about it. At his level of strength, the defensive sword art couldn't possibly injure him. For him, it was merely a troublesome sword art, not much of a threat. However, at this moment, the sword control art was almost invincible in Yi Chen's hands. The frightening speed didn't give him any chance to block. He was certain that Yi Chen had cultivated the sword control art to the highest realm. Moreover, Yi Chen also had some talent in soul power. Otherwise, even if he cultivated it to the highest realm, he wouldn't be able to display such might. Hearing this, Yi Chen neither agreed nor disagreed. In the hands of others, the imperial sword technique was merely a shortcut to becoming a top-notch swordsman. Although it had great significance, it didn't solve the root of the problem, as it didn't have enough potential. But in his hands it was a super-killing move. Currently, he had merely cultivated the imperial sword technique to the second level, and it already had the power to heavily injure Master Heaven Sword. If he wanted to, he could easily take Master Heaven Sword's head. If he cultivated it to the highest level, the third level, even he himself didn't know how destructive it would be. Taking a deep breath, Master Sky Sword's eyes sharpened. I'd like to see how strong the so-called Imperial Sword technique is. Previously, when he was sent flying by the shockwave, his reaction was a little slow. In a situation where he was fully focused, he believed that he could block the flying sword. You can't stop it. Yi Chen pointed his finger in the air, and the emerald green longsword turned into an emerald green ray of light, flashed to the right side of Master Sky Sword, and fiercely stabbed. I saw it. Master Sky Sword found the trajectory of the sword and slashed at it. With a calm expression, Yi Chen tilted his finger. Clang! In the next moment, blazing sparks appeared behind Master Sky Sword's back. At the critical moment, Yi Chen controlled the flying sword, and as if teleporting, he arrived behind Master Sky Sword. The latter didn't even have the time to turn around and was hit. Although the destructive sword qi was weakened by the protective Jin Yuan, and a part of it was neutralized by the armor, some of the sword qi was still transmitted into Master Sky Sword's body through the armor, causing him to bleed from all 7 apertures. I told you, you can't stop it. Yi Chen's defensive sword art was several times stronger than Sidu Hao's. First of all, his soul power was 5 times that of an ordinary person. Not only could he control the flying sword more flexibly and freely, he could also raise the flying sword's speed to a terrifying level. Moreover, Yi Chen's sword intent was the destruction sword intent, and its power was equivalent to a peak 5th step ordinary sword intent. This wasn't something Sidu Hao could compare with. With the two added together, Sidu Hao's defensive sword art was nothing more than trash in front of Yi Chen. Taking a step back, even if Master Sky Sword could see the flying sword's trajectory and block it in advance, it would still be useless, because Yi Chen's flying sword's offensive power was too high. It was equivalent to a killing move, and Master Sky Sword wouldn't be able to block it more than a few times. After a few times, his blood and qi would start to shake violently. Even if his reaction could keep up, his body couldn't, and he would still lose. How could he be so powerful? Master Sky Sword spurted blood as he was astonished. Yi Chen's defensive sword art had simply subverted his view of defensive sword art. But, according to some ancient records, defensive sword arts weren't this powerful. Master Sky Sword, you're not my opponent. Whether you admit that I'm Sword Master or not, I'm stronger than you. There's no need to doubt this. Yi Chen's voice transmitted over. Slowly standing up, Master Sky Sword seemed to have aged 10 years. Youngster, I take back my previous words. You're indeed stronger than me, and you have the qualifications to become Sword Master. In the future, I won't make a fuss about this matter. I believe that no one on this continent can challenge your position as Sword Master. Yi Chen was still growing. As time passed, his position as Sword Master would inevitably become more and more stable. After exchanging blows with Yi Chen, Master Sky Sword clearly understood that there was no Sword Master below Half-Step King Realm who could defeat Yi Chen. I hope you're right. With a thought, the emerald longsword turned around and returned to its scabbard with a clang. This matter is settled. I won't disturb you any further. Master Sky Sword smiled bitterly. With a wave of his sleeves, his figure flew back the way he came, disappearing into the horizon in a few moments. Yi Chen won. Seems like the title of Sword Master is in the bag. Nonsense. Relying on defensive sword art alone, no one is Yi Chen's opponent. I didn't expect a Sword Master to appear in our tiny windy nation. It's been hundreds of years since a Sword Master has appeared on the continent. Sword Master. This is the ultimate title for sword artists under life and death realm. If the Sword King was the Emperor of Swords, then the Sword Master was the General of Swords, and all other sword artists were soldiers. After the battle, Yi Chen and the Yi family members returned to the Yi family. Those martial artists who were watching the battle also left one after another. Because of the excitement, these people found a nearby restaurant and drank while chatting, talking about the powerful martial artists in the world. As soon as Master Sky Sword left Windy Nation, he ran into an old rival, Master Blood Sword. Master Blood Sword wanted to ridicule Master Sky Sword, but he discovered that the latter's aura was dispirited, as if he had suffered a serious internal injury. He doubtfully asked, "Old Ghost Sky Sword, did you win against that Yi Chen?" In his opinion, Master Sky Sword had certainly won against Yi Chen. However, Yi Chen was too strong, and Master Sky Sword had also suffered a serious injury. Master Sky Sword had never been fond of Master Blood Sword, so he coldly said, "I lost." With that, his figure flickered, and he crossed paths with Master Blood Sword. Lost? Master Blood Sword had yet to recover from his shock. This old guy must be deceiving me. How could he lose? Fine, since I'm already here, I might as well see what tricks this Yi Chen has up his sleeve. A sneer appeared on Master Blood Sword's face as he sped toward Misty Mountain. Yi Clan. Yi Chen frowned. Hundreds of li away, a blood-colored light shot straight toward the Yi Clan. According to this aura, Yi Chen guessed that the other party was Master Blood Sword, who was equally famous as Master Sky Sword. Coming at me one by one is always troublesome. Yi Chen was no longer in the mood to fight with his opponent. Go! With a wave of his finger, the emerald green longsword flew out of its sheath. Master Blood Sword's speed was very fast. In a flash, he had traveled dozens of li. When he was less than 200 li away from the Yi Clan, he suddenly became vigilant and slashed out with his sword. Clang! A flying sword instantly appeared in front of him, colliding with his longsword. The huge force made him stagger back 100 steps. Sword control art? Who is it? Master Blood Sword turned pale with fright. Master Blood Sword, leave now. You're not my match. Yi Chen's voice came from the flying sword. You're Yi Chen? Master Blood Sword was bewildered. Yes. Humph, you want to chase me away with a sword? Treating my Master Blood Sword as if I don't exist. Master Blood Sword was furious. If you don't want to leave, then leave lying down. Yi Chen didn't hold back at all. From 100 li away, he controlled his flying sword to attack Master Blood Sword. Although the huge distance had weakened his control, Yi Chen's soul power was 5 times that of ordinary people. It was still far beyond Sidu Hao's, and his offensive power was even more unparalleled. Ding 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 ding. Fortunately, Master Blood Sword could barely block it from 100 li away. But each time he blocked, his blood and chi would shake violently, making him dizzy and see illusions. Not good. Master Blood Sword was shocked. The long sword in his hand danced, creating a sword net. Break! The emerald longsword pierced through the net and slashed at Master Blood Sword's chest. Puff! Spurting out a mouthful of blood, Master Blood Sword was speechless. They were separated by more than 100 li. What realm had the opponent reached? Swish! The emerald longsword danced in the air, and once again appeared in front of Master Blood Sword, thrusting out. Go! Master Blood Sword no longer had the courage to look for Yi Chen. He blocked the flying sword with his blood-colored longsword. After spurting out another mouthful of blood, he borrowed the momentum to fly backward like a huge bird. His body flashed, flying away at a speed even faster than when he had charged. This old man really didn't lie to me. Master Blood Sword was incomparably sullen. He had been scared away before even seeing the opponent. When had he ever been humiliated like this? Master Sky Sword suffered a loss, but I suffered a bigger one. How about I incite Master Demon Sword to challenge him and let him suffer a big loss as well? Master Blood Sword thought maliciously. After chasing away Master Blood Sword, the emerald longsword flew back to the Yi family and returned to Yi Chen's scabbard. There shouldn't be any trouble from now on. Slowly letting out a turbid breath, Yi Chen thought to himself. The news of Yi Chen defeating Master Sky's sword had been spread by word of mouth among the spectators. The speed of the news had been increasing day by day. Of course, no matter how fast the news spread by word of mouth, it couldn't be compared to the news spread by the pavilion. It should be known that every city had a pavilion. Although these shops didn't have transportation gates, the pavilion still had a tool that could transmit simple information. Therefore, in just 1 week, the news of Yi Chen defeating Master Sky's sword had spread throughout the Sky Martial region, making everyone who was waiting to see the pavilion and Yi Chen become a laughingstock. They couldn't believe their ears. Master Sky Sword, who had been a top sword artist for hundreds of years, had actually been defeated by Yi Chen. It was too shocking. In this world, which sword artist could beat Yi Chen? The title of Master Sky Sword had already been fixed, and could not be changed. Unfortunately, no one knew that Yi Chen had scared away Blood Sword Master from 100 li away. Blood Sword Master wouldn't be so bored as to spread this sullen matter. Otherwise, the whole Sky Martial region would be in an even greater uproar. Chapter 666. In any case, whenever Sword Master was mentioned in Sky Martial region, it would be Yi Chen, and no one else. As for the entire True Spirit continent, it would still take some time to spread. After all, True Spirit continent was simply too vast. It would take half a year for the news to spread across the continent. It would take even longer for everyone to know. Yi Chen was the first genius to obtain the title of Sword Master in several hundred years. Just this one stroke was enough to enter the annals of history. In the pavilion at the center of the lake, a man and a woman were drinking tea and chatting. The man was Yi Chen and the woman was Long Bai. Sect Leader Long, what's the current situation of Dragon God's Celestial Palace? Yi Chen was rather concerned about Dragon God's Celestial Palace. Long Bai said, I'm a dozen years older than you. Call me Senior Sister Long. Shortly after, she said in a deep voice, Dragon God Celestial Palace's current situation is very bad. Some time ago, Azure Dragon Hall's deputy Hu Wenhai and his several hundred subordinates were ambushed. They were almost completely wiped out. Only a dozen or so people managed to escape, while Hu Wenhai perished. So many losses? Yi Chen was flabbergasted. Long Bai faintly nodded. Those who survived believe that there's a traitor. Currently, the people of Azure Dragon Hall are restless. Hall leader and the deputy's prestige has dropped somewhat. Elder Association has already sent people to investigate, but the results are unknown for the time being. So that's the case. How did those dozen or so people survive? Yi Chen's intuition was extremely sharp, and he could see some problems. Long Bai said, I also feel strange. Right, Yellow Dragon Hall's former deputy Yao Yifeng is among them. He's one of the survivors. Yao Yifeng? Yi Chen's brows creased. Is there something wrong with him? It shouldn't be too likely. There's a special restriction on his body, so it's not likely for him to rebel. Moreover, he didn't know the details of the operation beforehand. Only Azure Dragon Hall's leader and a few deputies knew. Therefore, the problem is very serious. If the traitor is really a deputy or even a hall leader, it will bring a frightening consequence to our Dragon God Celestial Palace. Long Bai's heart was heavy. Yi Chen turned silent. Indeed, if the traitor was Azure Dragon Hall leader or one of the deputy hall leaders, the impact would not be small. The entire Dragon God Celestial Palace would be thrown into turmoil. After all, Azure Dragon Hall was the head of the 5 great halls. If there was a traitor among the upper echelons, the other halls would most likely become restless and distrust the higher echelons. Once the subordinates did not trust the higher echelons, it would be troublesome. Senior Sister Long, tell the higher-ups of Dragon God's Celestial Palace that if they need me, Yi Chen, just say. Yi Chen himself was clear that he couldn't change the big picture by himself. But, he was confident that he could play a big role in a small-scale battle. It's good that you have this intention. However, the war between the fifth-rank sects is very dangerous. If you get ambushed or surrounded, the chances of dying are quite high. In fact, Long Bai did not approve of Yi Chen going there. He still had a lot of potential, and there was hope for him to enter the life and death realm in the future. And a life and death king was far more important than an entire war. I know, but I still want to help Dragon God's celestial palace. Yi Chen was already on the same boat with Dragon God's celestial palace. Whether it was for Dragon God's celestial palace or himself, he couldn't cower. All right, I'll tell you. Long Bai rejoiced that she had taken a fancy to Yi Chen back then. This youngster was even more outstanding than she had imagined. Potential, talent, and character were all top-notch. In the whole world, there weren't many like him. While the two were chatting, in the eastern shallow ocean, in the Dragon God Celestial Palace's Elder Hall, the sounds of argument never stopped. In my opinion, we should place restrictions on the Azure Dragon Palace's Vice Palace Masters, just like Yao Yifeng, a stout, black-haired old man exuding a heavy killing chi said from the fifth seat of the Elder's table. As soon as these words were spoken, the old man opposite him immediately shook his head. No! Not to mention the possibility of them being traitors. Even if they are traitors, we can't do this. Once we do it, the hearts of the people will become even more unstable. It's tantamount to telling others that our Elder Council is suspecting them. The consequences will be unimaginable. There's no need to announce it. Do it in secret. That won't do either. If they aren't traitors and are completely loyal to our Dragon God Celestial Palace, wouldn't doing this chill their hearts? If they don't have any rebellious thoughts, we'll force them out. Then what do you think we should do? The opposing old man smiled bitterly. Isn't everyone trying to think of a solution? I believe there must be a solution. Sigh, by the time we think of a solution, our Dragon God Celestial Palace will lose a lot of people. The tall and sturdy old man said angrily. Cough, cough. Sitting on the main seat was a white-haired old man. He was a core member of the Dragon God Celestial Palace, a person of virtue and prestige. He had held the position of Great Elder for more than 100 years, and his strength was unfathomable. He cleared his throat and said, "This time we're discussing two topics. First, how to deal with the traitor problem, and second, how to reverse the disadvantageous situation facing the four hostile forces. Since we don't have any clues about the traitor problem, let's discuss the second one first." Hearing these words, an elder sitting at the end of the table said, "Great Elder, in my opinion, we should dispatch people from the headquarters to support Azure Dragon Hall and Black Dragon Hall. Right, our Dragon God Celestial Palace has 3 great secret forces. As long as we dispatch one, we can deal with the problem and catch the 4 hostile forces unprepared." The elder beside him agreed. "I don't think it's appropriate. The most important thing right now is to wait for sect leader to come out. Before that, it's best not to provoke the 4 hostile forces too much. If we dispatch the secret forces, the hostile forces will certainly dispatch their own. This is tantamount to expanding the scale of the war ahead of time, which will only bring more harm than good." The similarly virtuous and prestige second elder vetoed. Second elder is right. This suggestion cannot be accepted. Third elder said. At this moment, an elder suddenly said, "I have a method that satisfies both sides." What method? Everybody's attention was drawn. This elder was the 18th elder. He said with a beaming smile, "I don't know if you've heard the news, but the first sword master in several hundred years has appeared on True Spirit Continent. We all know this person. He's Yi Chen." Yi Chen, sword master? Not possible, right? It's only been a few years. Yeah, 18th elder, you didn't hear wrong, did you? Hearing these words, the 18th elder didn't argue and took out a book from his storage ring. On the cover of the book, there were 3 big words: Master Ranking. This is the 2nd Master Ranking of True Spirit Continent. Take a look and you'll understand. As he spoke, The 18th elder handed over the ranking to the person beside him. The person beside him flipped to the first page, and his eyes immediately widened. First Master ranking Yi Chen, Sword Master. It's true. Let me take a look. The other elders urged. Soon, the ranking turned around and landed in the hands of the 18th elder. The 18th elder said, "Now you believe me, right? This is indeed true. But, 18th elder, don't forget that individual strength is not that important in a sect war. Moreover, he has a lot of potential. We can't let him take the risk. If we lose a martial genius who has the potential to enter the life and death realm, it will be more painful than losing thousands of experts." The 18th elder said, "Once an individual's strength reaches a certain level, it will actually be very useful. He alone is equivalent to a small group of Sea of Soul Realm expert. As long as he is not surrounded, he will basically be unstoppable. As for a large-scale war, the 4 opposing parties have a lot of people, and our Dragon God's Celestial Palace has a lot of people as well. Even if it doesn't work out, some of us will be able to escape. Of course, the most important thing is that White Dragon Hall's leader Mo Feng mentioned that Yi Chen has the intention to come. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought him up." Everybody was a bit hesitant as they looked at the head elder. The head elder didn't look at them and said to the 18th elder, "You said it's the best of both worlds. What about the other one?" The 18th elder said, "Azure Dragon Hall has lost a deputy, who won high. Let's let Yi Chen take his place. Moreover, with Yi Chen in the Azure Dragon Hall, there might be some unexpected gains, such as finding a spy." Faintly nodding, the head elder said, "How about this, 18th elder? You go to Windy Nation and have a chat with Yi Chen. Listen to his opinion, but don't force him. It would be best if you could dissuade him. If he insists, I'll talk to the 2 protectors." The affairs of the Dragon God's Celestial Palace were usually handled by the Elders Association. Above them were the left and right protectors, who had the same status as the head elder. Usually, when there was an important decision, the head elder would have to discuss it with the 4 protectors. "Yes, head elder." The 18th elder nodded. "All right, dismissed." The head elder stood up and left. After cultivating the defensive sword art to the 2nd layer, it would be impossible for him to improve it in a short time. As for profound martial skills, apart from Golden Hurricane, all of them were already at perfection. However, Golden Hurricane needed to fuse Water Profound and Metal Profound, which was extremely difficult. Yi Chen didn't have much of a clue for the time being. However, there was always an exception. On this day, while Yi Chen was practicing his killing move Thunder Devour, he suddenly heard a roar in his head. A silver thunder ball shot out with a world-destroying might, flattening a small mountain near the Yi family. Its might was more than twice as powerful as usual. This is 5th step Destruction Sword Spirit. Yi Chen sucked in a deep breath and sank his consciousness into his Sea of Soul. Inside his Sea of Soul, the Destruction Sword Spirit had grown a lot, emitting a black radiance all over its body. This radiance was like a black hole that seemed capable of devouring souls. On the other hand, the Slaughter Sword Spirit had shrunk a lot, and its color was a bit dimmer than before. When the Destruction Sword Spirit was formed, it had already started absorbing the power of the Slaughter Sword Spirit. Although it was very small, it was still growing. Yi Chen originally thought that this process would take a long time. After all, the Slaughter Sword Spirit's grade was the same as the Destruction Sword Spirit's. Absorbing its power would not be easy. However, the current situation was without a doubt that the Destruction Sword Spirit had absorbed enough power from the Slaughter Sword Spirit, reaching the 5th step from peak 4th step. Its might was equivalent to an ordinary 6th step Sword Spirit. The difference between peak 5th step and 6th step was like the difference between a half-step king and a life and death king. It was extremely frightening. After absorbing the majority of its power, the Slaughter Sword Spirit had fallen from peak 4th step to 3rd step, which was a whole step and a half. its might had been greatly reduced, and the remaining Slaughter Sword Spirit might not be enough to upgrade the Destruction Sword Spirit to the 6th step. Being able to upgrade it to peak 5th step would already be quite good. Chapter 667. 5th Step Destruction Sword Soul. This is a genuine King Sword Soul. Be it in essence or might, it has reached the King level. In the past, although the peak 4th step Destruction Sword Soul had the might of an ordinary peak 5th step Sword Soul and could be considered as a King Sword Soul, peak 4th step was still peak 4th step. There would always be some difference. But now, the Destruction Sword Soul had advanced to the 5th step, and its essence was a 5th step Sword Soul, one level higher than peak 4th step. As for its might, it was equivalent to an ordinary 6th step Sword Soul. 5th step is King Sword Soul, 6th step is Peak King Sword Soul, and 7th step is Emperor Sword Soul. Each step is harder than the previous one, and its might increases by several folds. Right now, in terms of will, I'm not much weaker than a Peak King. At most, I'm a bit weaker in application. Yi Chen was very clear on how frightening a 5th step Destruction Sword Soul was. Before, without using the defensive sword art, his strength was more or less the same as Master Sky Sword, only a bit stronger in defense. But now, with a 5th step Destruction Sword Soul, he could easily kill his opponent in a few moves. Let's test its might first. Standing in front of a rockery, Yi Chen's forehead slightly swelled, emitting a layer of jade-like black light. In the next moment, a faint black illusory sword image shot out and swept across the rockery, so fast that it seemed like an illusion. The rockery and the space around it slightly distorted. Then, with a puff, the dozens of meters tall rockery was disintegrated into fine powder by the frightening sword intent. Because the speed of destruction was too fast, the rockery maintained its existence for a few blinks of an eye until it couldn't support its own weight anymore. Only then did it collapse, turning into a pile of ash that drifted in the wind. It seems to be more powerful than I imagined. I'm afraid the number of moves needed to kill Master Sky Sword will be reduced by 1. The sword intent released by the 5th step Destruction Sword Spirit was much more powerful than ordinary 5th step sword intent. It could already completely affect reality. Without any exaggeration, if Yi Chen's will was below the 4th step, he wouldn't even need to make a move. A single strand of sword intent would be enough to annihilate the opponent's soul. And this was because Yi Chen wasn't a king. If Yi Chen were a life and death king, a single strand of sword intent would be enough to annihilate a peak master with 4th step willpower, ignoring all defenses. After all, Life and Death King's methods of using sword intent were much more profound than Yi Chen's. Under the same sword intent, Yi Chen would certainly not be able to contend against kings. Now that the sword soul has been upgraded, the attack power of the sword control art will also increase by a lot. The power of the defensive sword art was reflected in 4 aspects: Zhen Yuan, profound, sword intent, and soul power. Among them, the sword intent took up a large portion, especially the 5th step Destruction Sword intent. The soul power was mainly reflected in speed. Of course, under the condition that the quality did not change, the faster the speed, the higher the attack power. Huff. Letting out a heavy breath, Yi Chen gazed at the distant scenery and inwardly thought, the Destruction Sword Soul is already at the 5th step. I wonder when the Immortal Sword Soul will take shape. The Destruction Sword Soul contains slaughter, so it could absorb the power of slaughter. On the other hand, the Immortal Sword Soul and the Destruction Sword Soul were equal, and there was no such thing as one absorbing the other. However, compared to the Destruction Sword Soul, the Immortal Sword Soul seemed to be much harder to form. Wasn't there a saying that destruction was easier than construction? Yi Chen had a premonition that one day, when the Immortal Sword Soul and the Destruction Sword Soul reached a true balance, something unexpected would happen. In the forbidden area of South Rudra sect, there was a conveyor gate in an underground chamber. The energy whirlpool inside the conveyor gate suddenly accelerated. After 3 blinks of an eye, a figure was sent out and stood before the conveyor gate. This person was none other than the 18th Elder of Dragon God's Celestial Palace. Tap, tap. The sound of footsteps resounded as Long Bai walked down the secret passage. 18th Elder. The 18th Elder warmly smiled. Miss, you've lost a lot of weight. Long Bai sighed and asked, You've come for Yi-Chin? And Great Elder asked me to have a chat with him. He also has a message for me to pass on to the palace. Since you've come, talk to him face to face. I'll take you to the Yi family. I'll trouble Miss to lead the way. Before the two arrived at the Yi family, they were sensed by Yi-Chin. Dragon God's Celestial Palace's elder? Judging from the 18th Elder's attire, Yi-Chin guessed the other party's identity. In the pavilion at the center of the lake, Yi-Chin had personally brewed tea and was waiting there. From afar, the 18th Elder saw Yi-Chin. Inside the pavilion was a blue-clothed youngster with a handsome face. The tea on the table was emitting steam in spirals, contrasting with Yi-Chin's temperament. He was extremely calm, without a trace of impetuousness. This was extremely rare among youngsters. Ha ha! Laughing heartily, the 18th Elder and Long Bai entered the pavilion. Yi-Chin, this is the first time we've met. I'm the 18th Elder of Dragon God's Celestial Palace, surnamed you. The 18th Elder didn't immediately sit down and introduced himself. Yi-Chin stood up and gestured with his hand. I've been waiting for Dragon God's Celestial Palace to send someone over. Elder Yu, please sit. Both sides sat down, and Long Bai said to Yi-Chin, Yi-Chin, the 18th Elder will tell you the general situation of Dragon God's Celestial Palace. The final decision will still be made by you. Yi-Chin lightly sipped the tea and said directly, We'll talk about the general situation after we arrive at Dragon God's Celestial Palace. The 18th Elder was somewhat stunned. Exchanging a glance with Long Bai, he said, Hearing about you is not as good as meeting you in person. Just these words of yours have made me have no choice but to have a whole new level of respect for you. You don't do things sloppily, and you won't change your attitude because of other people's opinions. No wonder you've been walking at the forefront for so many years, becoming the first sword master of true spirit continent in several hundred years. Yi-Chen's terror deeply shocked the 18th Elder. He was not a solitary martial artist, nor was he an elder of a small sect, but a member of Dragon God's Celestial Palace's Elder Association. He had a way of seeing through people. However, in front of Yi-Chen, he couldn't see through the latter at all. However, he didn't need to see through the latter. Just from the latter's words, he could tell that Yi-Chen was even more outstanding than he had imagined. Yi-Chen said, It's rare for Elder Yu to come to Yi Clan. Let's not talk business. Tea is fine. Alright, tea. The 18th Elder naturally knew that there was no need to say anything. Long Bai helplessly smiled. In South Rudra Sect's forbidden area, Yi-Chen and the 18th Elder stood in front of the conveyor gate. Miss, we'll take our leave first. The 18th Elder turned his head and said. Long Bai nodded and said to Yi-Chen, Yi-Chen, be careful. Your life is the most important. You have to understand that your value far surpasses everything else. I know what I'm doing. Yi-Chen naturally wouldn't act rashly. Alright, let's go. The 18th Elder took the lead and stepped into the conveyor gate, followed by Yi-Chen. The Dragon God's Celestial Palace was situated on a huge island. In the world of Yi-Chen's previous life, this island was definitely a small continent. On the island, countless buildings rose and fell one after another, with distinct levels. At the center of the island was an even larger building. At the center of the building was a majestic palace with a dragon statue coiling around it. A majestic aura soared into the sky, causing the clouds in the sky to be unable to gather. The place where Yi-Chen and the 18th Elder appeared was in the center of the island. Looking out, they couldn't see the end of it. The clouds and mist made the buildings faintly discernible. It was like a scenic spot in the heavens, magnificent and luxurious at the same time. Walking out of the conveyor gate, the two arrived at a plaza. On the plaza, there were many people coming and going. Most of them were core disciples of the dragon god's celestial palace, as well as some attendants and outer elders. 18th Elder. Greetings, 18th Elder. Along the way, people would greet the 18th Elder from time to time. The status of the members of the Elder Association was not like that of an ordinary sex inner elder. Because the Dragon God Celestial Palace was a peak 5th grade sect, the hierarchy was even stricter. Often, there were many small ranks within the same rank. Moreover, the Elder Association was the peak of the entire Dragon God Celestial Palace, and handled all the affairs of the palace. The 18th Elder was a gentle person, nodding and greeting one by one. Who is this person? He looks so young. Peak mid-sea of Soul Realm Cultivation Base, 20 years old at most. Being accompanied by 18th Elder Tisk Tsk. These people were not idiot. They knew that a young man who could be accompanied by the 18th Master would not be simple. Moreover, from the way the 18th Master talked to Yi Chen, it was obvious that the two had the same status, and there was no hierarchy between them. Yi Chen did not pay attention to the other people's gazes. He glanced around and realized that the whole area was covered by a layer of enchantment, which was extremely horrifying. There was no trace of it at all, and no one could sense it at all, as if it was hidden in the void. What shocked him the most was that the trees planted on the roadside of the core region were all rare species. There were mid-grade purple fir trees, mid-grade dragon head trees, mid-grade evergreen trees, and not a single low-grade tree. The flowers and grasses in the flower beds were innumerable, with the lowest being low-grade. There were also quite a number of mid-grade flowers and grasses. Cultivating under these trees, the heaven and earth yuan qi was extremely rich, allowing one to cultivate twice the result with half the effort. Moreover, these grasses could be casually harvested and refined into valuable pills. Trees and grasses all had grades, so they naturally required a lot of nutrient. Therefore, along the way, Yi Chen could see people watering plants and grasses from time to time. This water was not ordinary water, as it contained a kind of exuberant vitality energy. If one wasn't afraid of losing face, they could even use it to drink. If it were a small clan without any grade, they would definitely treasure it and not use it for water. Sucking in a cold breath, Yi Chen finally understood the strength of a 5th grade sect. Compared to a 5th grade sect, a 6th grade sect was simply not worth mentioning. Raising his head, he could see many towering trees in the depths of the palace. Due to the clouds and mist, Yi Chen could only see the nearest ones. However, these few were all upper-grade, countless times more precious than ordinary upper-grade spirit grasses. It should be known that among plants, trees were the most valuable, often dozens or even hundreds of times more valuable than other spirit grasses. Yi Chen, how is the Celestial Dragon God Palace? 18th Elder could see that Yi Chen was very astonished. Yi Chen replied honestly, "It's more prosperous than I imagined. Dragon God Celestial Palace's prosperity is not what it looks like on the surface. However, everything has a price. It's precisely because of its prosperity that it requires even more resources. Once the resources don't keep up, problems will easily arise. It's not an exaggeration to say that the resources required by Dragon God's Celestial Palace are at least 100 times that of ordinary 6th grade sections. From 6th grade to 5th grade, you can think of it as going from Sea of Soul Realm to Life and Death Realm. As long as a 6th grade sect had a Life and Death King, it could become the most ordinary 5th grade sect. After several hundred years of development, it could become a mid-5th grade sect. A peak 5th grade sect like Dragon God's Celestial Palace would need at least 1,000 years of development. Chapter 668. Walking on the bright and clean jade road, Yi Chen casually plucked a small white flower from a nearby tree and brought it to his nose for a sniff. A fragrance filled his nostrils, and an aura that could shake one's spirit entered his body. "Right, Elder Yu, I'd like to ask you something. Do you know Su Jing?" Yi Chen asked. Elder Yu replied, Of course I do. I won't hide it from you, but Sect Master attaches great importance to her, no less than you. He has already appointed her as the Dragon God's Celestial Palace's goddess. Her position is only below Sect Master, and above everyone else. Goddess? Yi Chen was flabbergasted. In truth, he had no idea why Dragon King would attach so much importance to Su Jing. He naturally knew that Su Jing was extraordinary, but everything had to have a reason. Without a reason, Yi Chen didn't believe, and didn't dare to believe. However, since Su Jing was the goddess, it should be a good thing. Do you know where she is? Yi Chen asked again. A strange expression flickered on Elder Yu's face. I don't know. After Sect Master appointed her as the goddess, we haven't seen her again. However, according to my guess, she should be in seclusion. You also know that this woman's origin is extraordinary, and even Sect Master attaches great importance to her. Moreover, Sect Master said that he appointed her as the goddess, and it wasn't without reason. As for what the reason is, he won't tell us for the time being. Hearing these words, Yi Chen smiled bitterly. He originally thought that he would be able to meet Su Jing after coming to Dragon God's Celestial Palace. But now it seemed impossible. He didn't know when she would come out of seclusion. Seeing Yi Chen's regretful expression, Elder Yu smiled. You're still young, and you still have a lot of time to squander. A few years is nothing. When you enter the life and death realm one day, even 100 years will be nothing. Yi Chen smiled, but didn't say anything. Grandpa Yu. The two of them were walking on a large street in the middle of the buildings. Just as they were about to turn a corner, a group of young men and women approached them. Each of them was either handsome or enchanting. The woman who spoke looked to be around 22 to 24 years old. She was wearing an emerald dress that resembled a palace dress and had an emerald hairpin in her hair. Her beautiful eyes sparkled as she sweetly called out to Elder Yu. Elder Yu revealed a smile and said, So it's Yusin. Greetings, Elder Yu. Greetings, 18th Elder. It was easy to tell that this group of young men and women were all core disciples of Dragon God's Celestial Palace. As a 5th grade sect, the significance of being a core disciple was different from that of ordinary sections. In ordinary sects, once one's cultivation base reached a certain level, one could become an elder. However, a 5th grade sect could maintain the status of a disciple. However, the status of a core disciple was not lower than that of an ordinary elder. It was almost second only to the members of the Elder Association, equivalent to an inner elder. The beauty named Yusin had exquisite facial features. Her eyebrows were bright, and her eyes sparkled like the stars in the sky. She suspiciously glanced at Yi Chen. Grandpa Yu, this is... The disciples of Dragon God's Celestial Palace rarely went to True Spirit Continent. Those who knew about Yi Chen were mostly the upper echelons of the palace. Therefore, it wasn't strange that Yusin didn't know him. Elder Yu introduced, Yi Chen, this is my Dragon God's Celestial Palace's 5th disciple, Chen Yusin. Yusin, you might not have heard of Yi Chen, but he's the most outstanding among the young generation of True Spirit Continent. No one can compare to him. Moreover, he's the first sword master of True Spirit Continent in several hundred years, and is even ranked first in the master's list. Every time Chen Yusin heard Yi Chen's identity, her mouth would open a little bit wider, forming an O shape. Most outstanding among the young generation of True Spirit Continent? No one can compare to him? Sword Master of True Spirit Continent? Ranked first in the master's list? Each of these titles was frightening. Although they boasted themselves as extraordinary, they also knew that True Spirit Continent was extremely powerful. There were countless 5th grade sects, and there was even the Void Gate, a 4th grade sect that surpassed the Dragon God's Celestial Palace. To be able to suppress so many geniuses, one's talent and strength could no longer be described as powerful, but frightening. Are you exaggerating? He's only at the peak of mid-sea of Soul Realm. A youth beside Chen Yusin revealed a skeptical expression and muttered. Elder Yu glared at him and said, when you see him in the future, treat him as if he's a member of Elders Association or the 5 palace leaders. Remember, don't offend him, or you'll have to bear the consequences. He knew that the core disciples of Dragon God's Celestial Palace were very proud. Unfortunately, compared to Yi Chen, their pride was not even worth mentioning. It could be said that Yi Chen was already a life and death king in the eyes of Elders Association, which meant that his chances of entering life and death realm were more than 50%. Greetings, Senior Brother Yi. Chen Yusin seemed very obedient. She could see that although Yi Chen looked like a handsome young man with an extraordinary temperament, his pair of dull eyes would occasionally reveal a wisp of light. This wisp of light was like a sword or a blade, carrying a destructive aura that made her heart palpitate. Of course, she didn't know that because Yi Chen had just raised his destruction sword soul to the 5th step, he was somewhat unable to control his sword intent, causing a wisp of sword intent to leak out. Otherwise, one wouldn't be able to see through Yi Chen's mysteriousness and would only think that he was not simple. Greetings, Junior Sister Chen. Please advise me in the future. Yi Chen faintly smiled. Of course. Chen Yusin curiously sized up Yi Chen. Alright, I'm going to take Yi Chen to Elders Association. You two go do your own things. Finished speaking, Elder Yu left with Yi Chen. After the two left, the youngster by Chen Yusin's side spoke in an unconvinced tone, only peak mid-sea of Soul Realm Cultivation Base. The title of Sword Master must have been given by himself, or someone trying to curry favor with him. Junior Brother Wu, your cultivation base is only at early sea of Soul Realm. You don't have the qualifications to judge him. I believe that Grandpa Yu's words are not without evidence. In truth, Chen Yusin was also a bit doubtful. However, she believed that Elder Yu wouldn't lie. Therefore, if she wanted to know the truth about Yi Chen, she would have to understand a bit more. Of course, I can't compare to him. However, Senior Brother's goal is also Sword Master, and Senior Brother is already at peak late sea of Soul Realm. The youngster had a good relationship with the head disciple of Dragon God's Celestial Palace. Therefore, he didn't like Yi Chen's Sword Master title at all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so unconvinced. Don't cause trouble, Chen Yusin reminded him. After that, she frowned slightly. She knew that her eldest senior brother's goal was the sword sect, and her eldest senior brother was indeed the most talented genius in the way of the sword she had ever seen. His achievements in the way of the sword were terrifying. 1 man and 1 sword, he had once killed 3 notorious evil sword grandmasters in the Eastern Shallow Sea. He had also defeated all the geniuses in the way of the sword in the enemy forces. It could be said that Senior Brother's position in Eastern Shallow Ocean was equivalent to Yi Chen's position in True Spirit Continent according to Elder Yu. 1 mountain couldn't accommodate 2 tigers. Sooner or later, something would happen. I'll look for Grandpa Yu when I have time. He should know more inside information, Chen Yusin inwardly said. On the way to the Elder's Hall, Elder Yu said, that Chen Yusin is pretty good. I've watched her grow up. She's only 27 this year, but she already has a peak early sea of Soul Realm Cultivation Base. Her strength is much higher than ordinary sea of Soul Realm Masters. Elder Yu only knew that Yi Chen was very powerful, and his reputation had surpassed the 5 young tyrants. However, he wasn't clear about the geniuses of True Spirit Continent. He thought that Chen Yusin should be at the top of the list, which was why he felt proud. Unfortunately, in Yi Chen's opinion, Chen Yusin was about the same as Jing Aoxuan and Li Xiaoyun. There were many levels above her. Of course, Sky Martial Region was an abnormal place, and Chen Yusin was only 27 years old. Therefore, it couldn't be said that she was weak. On the contrary, she was already very outstanding. She was definitely one of the peak geniuses. Not bad. Yi Chen spoke the truth. Dragon God's Celestial Palace was one of the peak 5th grade sects, and its 5 disciples were all at peak early C of Soul Realm. One could easily imagine that the 4 above them were even more powerful. In terms of comprehensive strength, they were much stronger than Mysterious Sect. We've arrived at the Elders' Hall. Soon, the 2 of them arrived in front of a magnificent and majestic hall. 2 stone sculptures of strange beasts were placed at the entrance of the hall. The strange beasts were holding a scale in their hands. The scale was extremely stable, representing absolute fairness and the dignity of the Elder Council of the Elder Hall. Come, let's go in together. Elder, you didn't let Yi Chen wait outside and directly brought him into the Elder's Hall. Li Tong, ring the assembly bell. Upon entering the hall, Elder Yu directly spoke to an attendant beside him. Yes. Dong, dong, dong. The sound of the bell, which was full of texture, spread out in all directions. In a short while, the members of the Elders' Hall arrived one after another and took their seats. He's Yi Chen. What a young appearance. This was their first time seeing Yi Chen in person. In the past, they had only seen Yi Chen's portrait. Yi Chen was much younger than they had imagined. Judging from his appearance, he seemed to be in his early 20s. This meant that Yi Chen's advancement was extremely fast, allowing him to maintain the appearance of a 20-year-old. Yi Chen, I'm surnamed Lin. Nice to meet you. Some elders started to greet Yi Chen. They didn't put on any airs of Elders' Hall members, and they couldn't do so in front of Yi Chen. Be it strength or status, both sides were equal. In terms of importance, Yi Chen was much higher than them. Tap, tap. Footsteps echoed as another elder walked in. This elder was the second elder, second only to the great elder. Just like Yi Chen, he was a sword artist. His nickname was Master Silver Sword, and his weapon was a silver sword. In terms of strength, he was just like the great elder, unfathomable. Yi Chen. The second elder sized up Yi Chen. Yi Chen, this is the second elder, Elder you introduced. Yi Chen nodded, second elder. The second elder didn't say anything. His figure shook, and a sword intent that could slaughter the world gushed out. The entire Elders' Hall seemed to be shrouded in a bloody light. Within the bloody light, everyone saw different scenes. Some were mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and some were battlefields. It was a scene that could shake one's mind and cause one's soul to swell. Most of the sword intent was concentrated on Yi Chen. Chapter 669. Peak 4th Step Slaughter Sword Intent. Yi Chen was somewhat astonished. Peak 4th Step Slaughter Sword Intent's might was almost at the level of Peak 5th Step Ordinary Sword Intent. Although it couldn't compare to Destruction Sword Intent of the same grade, it wasn't much weaker than Destruction Sword Intent in terms of targeting flesh and blood. Almost at the same time, Yi Chen's forehead swelled, and a boundless Destruction Sword Intent gushed out. Under the assault of this Destruction Sword Intent, the Elders' Hall suddenly darkened, as if a black hole had appeared. Even light couldn't escape. Pop! Once the Killing Sword Intent and the Destruction Sword Intent clashed, a cracking sound was heard in the sky. The space twisted slightly. Then, everyone saw the chair right next to the second master shatter. His face turned pale, and he backed out 3 steps uncontrollably. His mind was in a mess. Second Elder! Second Elder, are you all right? Everyone turned pale with fright. I'm fine. After 2 blinks of an eye, the second elder recovered his mind and looked at Yi Chen with lingering fear. This is Destruction Sword Intent, a supreme sword intent. The second elder was experienced and knowledgeable, so he immediately recognized the sword intent's attribute. Yi Chen knew that his opponent was probing him, so he only used the same grade Destruction Sword Intent to resist. Moreover, he immediately withdrew it, intending to retreat rather than injure his opponent. Even so, because of the high quality of Destruction Sword Intent, even at the same grade, it was not something that Slaughter Sword Intent could resist. Thanks for letting me win. Withdrawing the Destruction Sword Intent, Yi Chen said. Good. Seems like Lu Wusheng kicked an iron plate this time. Worthy of being the continent's first sword master in several hundred years. This silver sword master is nothing in front of you. The second elder laughed heartily, his face full of admiration and admiration. Yi Chen faintly smiled, but didn't say anything. This silver sword master's strength was a bit lacking compared to Master Sky Sword. If he were to say he was being modest, it would be too fake. If he were to say that the opponent was indeed inferior to him, it would easily make the latter unhappy. Therefore, it was best not to say anything. I was originally worried about something, but it seems like there's no need now. You alone are equivalent to 10 C of Soul Realm expert. As for keeping you here, I'm afraid I'll need dozens of C of Soul Realm experts and hundreds of astral reaching experts. Second Elder Silver Sword Master's evaluation of Yi Chen was extremely high. He could tell that Yi Chen had held back a moment ago. As for how powerful the latter's sword intent was, he had no idea. His intuition told him that the latter's destruction sword intent had very likely surpassed the peak of the 4th step and reached the 5th step. However, his rationality told him that this was impossible. Destruction Sword Soul was much harder to raise than ordinary Sword Souls. Although the difficulty of raising it to the 5th step was not as exaggerated as raising an ordinary Sword Soul to the 6th step, it was not that far off. 1 was equivalent to 10, and this was just an implicit statement. If he were to engage in guerrilla warfare, he might even be able to contend against 20. However, if the second elder knew of Yi Chen's true strength, his jaw would probably drop. Without the defensive sword art, even if the destruction sword spirit reached the 5th step, Yi Chen would only be able to contend against dozens of Sea of Soul Realm experts at most. Moreover, he would have to engage in guerrilla warfare. After all, his speed wouldn't allow him to dodge dozens of attacks, and his defense wouldn't be able to block dozens of attacks. Even if his offense was high, it would only allow him to kill people a bit faster and more efficiently. However, with the defensive sword art, Yi Chen could easily behead people from hundreds of li away. Killing 1 at a time, 100 at a time. In theory, Yi Chen could kill endlessly until his Zhen Yuan and soul power were exhausted, and his sword intent dried up. Of course, his opponents weren't fools. They would observe with their soul power, and if they discovered that they couldn't block the defensive sword art, they would join hands and defend together. In that case, the defensive sword art wouldn't necessarily be effective. The joint defense of dozens of people wasn't something a single person could break through. In any case, Yi Chen decided not to reveal the defensive sword art for the time being. Good steel should be used on the blade's edge, and he would kill to his heart's content. Normally, his strength was more than enough. In a one-on-one battle, even Master Sky Sword wouldn't be able to block more than a few moves from him. Haha, Second Elder, it seems like you're convinced by Yi Chen. The one who spoke was the usually blunt 13th Elder. The Second Elder didn't get angry and nodded. I'm convinced. How can I not be convinced? Seeing is believing. Yi Chen's strength is clear for all to see. I can't be unconvinced. Alright, let's all sit down. The first elder will be here soon. The third elder saw this scene and nodded to himself before opening his mouth to speak. Hearing these words, everyone sat down one after another. Yi Chen sat beside 18th elder, Elder Yu. It didn't take long for the grand elder to arrive. He didn't have the sharpness of the second elder or the silver sword master, nor did he have the might of the third elder. The grand elder gave off a very ordinary feeling, as if he was just an ordinary old man. However, as soon as he entered Elder Hall, everyone quieted down. The great elder stood before the elder's table and swept his gaze from left to right. When his gaze passed by Yi Chen, he faintly nodded and revealed a gentle expression. Since everyone is here, let's begin. After speaking, the great elder sat down. The third elder waited for the great elder to sit down before saying to Yi Chen, Yi Chen, I'm very gratified that you decided to come to Dragon God's Celestial Palace. However, before that, I have to remind you that the sect war this time is extremely dangerous. It's not as simple as you think. I personally don't recommend you to come. As people of high status, we have to look at the big picture and know which is more important. Yeah, you don't need to come. Individual strength can't play a crucial role in the sect war. Although you're very powerful, you can't control the overall situation. You can only reduce the casualties of my Dragon God's Celestial Palace, but we'll have to bear the consequences of your fall. If not for the fact that Dragon God's Celestial Palace was facing a crisis and the 4 opposing forces were pressing on, not a single member of the Elders Association would have agreed to Yi Chen's arrival. Even the 18th Elder didn't agree. Therefore, they were in a dilemma. On one hand, they wanted to use Yi Chen's battle strength to gradually turn the situation around, and on the other hand, they didn't want Yi Chen to take the risk. A trace of warmth flowed in Yi Chen's heart. Regardless of whether these elders fancied his talent or had other intentions, they truly didn't want him to take the risk. This was the third power Yi Chen had acknowledged apart from Yi family and Sky Cloud sect. Sweeping his gaze around, he engraved everyone in his eyes and said, I, Yi Chen, have walked out of dangerous situations all my life. Although the sect war is more dangerous, it's no different from an ordinary adventure for me. Moreover, I don't dare say I can help Dragon God's Celestial Palace defeat the 4 opposing forces, but I can guarantee my survival. I believe that after this sect war, my strength will continue to rise. On the other hand, if I don't pay attention when Dragon God's Celestial Palace is in danger, my mental state will be obstructed. Yi Chen's sword Dao was upright and aboveboard. After receiving the kindness of others, he naturally had to repay it. Most importantly, he would never deliberately avoid danger unless it was too great for him to bear. Only then would he carefully ponder for the best solution. Moreover, the longer Dragon King didn't appear, the more danger Dragon God's Celestial Palace would face. Even if he didn't come now, he would come sooner or later. Once Dragon King came out, all the problems would be easily solved. Chapter 670. Unfortunately, Dragon King's seclusion this time was a bit too long. It was no wonder that the 4 opposing forces were getting restless. If not for their apprehension of Dragon King's remaining might, they would have sent their armies to thoroughly eradicate Dragon God's Celestial Palace. How could they have given Dragon God's Celestial Palace even the slightest chance? Therefore, Yi Chen's arrival was the best timing. If he came late, Dragon God's Celestial Palace's strength would have been greatly damaged. Even if he was here, they wouldn't be able to contend against the 4 opposing forces. He wasn't arrogant enough to contend against 100 or even 1,000. 18th Elder, you didn't say anything. As early as in the Yi family, he knew that Yi Chen had already made up his mind, and nobody could change his mind. Moreover, he firmly believed that Yi Chen's survivability was very strong. Growing from a small genius to his current height, it was impossible for him not to have a strong survivability. What should be said had already been said. All the elders looked at the Great Elder, wanting to hear his opinion. The Great Elder said, I've already talked with the left and right protectors. They don't oppose Yi Chen's participation in the sect war. However, they emphasized that our Dragon God's Celestial Palace must have disciples participate as well. This will not only temper them, but also represent fairness. The Great Elder's meaning was clear. Yi Chen was not even a member of Dragon God's Celestial Palace, yet he had come to help Dragon God's Celestial Palace. As disciples of Dragon God's Celestial Palace, they naturally had to participate as well. Otherwise, it wouldn't be appropriate. Is this how it should be? Hearing these words, the majority of the elders nodded. The Great Elder looked at Yi Chen and asked, Yi Chen, have you used the drop of will left by sect leader in your Sea of Soul? He hoped that Yi Chen wouldn't use it. Only when life and death kings will reach the 6th step would they be able to leave a drop of will in someone else's Sea of Soul. It should be known that this drop of will was not just pure will, but also contained a wisp of natal Zhen Yuan. Only the natal Zhen Yuan of a life and death king could display this drop of will without restraint, which was equivalent to a full-strength defense of a half-step king. However, due to the limit of natal Zhen Yuan, life and death kings with 6-step will couldn't use it limitlessly. Every time they used it, they would lose a portion of their cultivation base. This has already been used. When Yi Chen first came to the Sky Martial region, he entered an underground crack in order to find the rootless flower and the shadowless grass. Who knew that the shadowless demon in there would be so powerful? If not for the Dragon King's will protecting him, he would have lost his life in there. After that, the Dragon King's will was exhausted. At the critical moment, the Destruction Sword soul was finally formed, and he successfully escaped from the underground crack. Until now, Yi Chen still had the lingering fear. Being possessed by the shadowless demon was definitely a very scary thing. Even someone as strong-willed as him could feel his hair standing on end. I used it. What a pity. The great elder shook his head. Soon after, he felt even more admiration for Yi Chen. Dragon God Celestial Palace also had a few disciples who had obtained a drop of Sect Master's will. However, none of them had used it. Although everyone's fortunes were different and the dangers they encountered were also different, in any case, Yi Chen had said that he had walked out of danger after danger, and it was indeed true. You have the heart to fight for my Dragon God Celestial Palace. As the Great Elder of Elders Association, I am extremely grateful. Before this, we had already discussed giving you the position of Azure Dragon Hall's deputy. Do you have any objections? If you do, we can discuss further. Azure Dragon Hall's deputy? Yi Chen knew that Azure Dragon Hall was the head of the 5 great halls. Although the position of deputy couldn't compare to that of the other 4 hall masters, his position was definitely above them, and the strength required was also much higher. He originally thought that giving him the position of head attendant at most would be good enough. After all, he had just arrived at Dragon God's Celestial Palace and didn't have much prestige. It would be hard to avoid dissatisfaction. Who knew that the result would be even better than he had imagined? His biggest problem in coming to Dragon God's Celestial Palace was that he had to listen to other people's orders. This was something he didn't like. Now all the problems were gone. Deputy Hall Masters had the authority to command the troops of one side, and would only be managed by the Hall Master. That's enough. A faint smile appeared on Yi Chen's face. All right. The Great Elder faintly nodded. Azure Dragon Hall's deputy command token can only be obtained after you take up the post. At that time, Elder Yu will take you there as before. Apart from this Dragon God token is also for you. With this token, you will be the Dragon God envoy of my Dragon God Celestial Palace. Although your authority isn't as great as Azure Dragon Hall Masters, your position will be higher. If necessary, you can disobey orders and act on your own. As he spoke, the Great Elder took out a 5-colored command token and handed it over to Yi Chen. 5 huge dragons were engraved on it, and their colors were cyan, black, red, white, and yellow. Yi Chen received the Dragon God token and was rather astonished. As far as he knew, the 5 Hall Masters had Azure Dragon Command tokens, Black Dragon Command token, Red Dragon Command token, White Dragon Command token, and Yellow Dragon Command token. Although Long Bai wasn't the Azure Dragon Hall's Deputy Hall Master, she also had a small Azure Dragon Command token. Since she was the direct descendant of Dragon King, her small Azure Dragon Command token was slightly different from others. The Dragon God token was a command token above the Azure Dragon Command token, and was extremely transcendental. He didn't know how many people had a Dragon God token, but it certainly wouldn't be more than a handful, perhaps even less. The Great Elder continued, "This Dragon God token has been distributed in total. One is for Goddess Su Jing and the other is for you. Use it well. Additionally, with the Dragon God token, you won't have any misgivings in the Dragon God's celestial palace. You can basically go anywhere, including the forbidden areas. The elders present didn't expect that Yi Chen could obtain a Dragon God token. Of course, they didn't think that it was the Great Elder's idea or the Left and Right Protector's idea. It must have been the sect leader's order. Otherwise, the Dragon God token wouldn't have been distributed to the Great Elder and the Left and Right Protectors. Yi Chen, with the Dragon God token, your position is equal to our entire Elder Association. Elder Yu's face revealed a trace of envy. Yi Chen put away the Dragon God token and said earnestly, "Many thanks to Senior Dragon King and everyone's great kindness. Yi Chen will certainly use the Dragon God token well." Status was given by others, so he wouldn't act recklessly. "Alright, this meeting is over. Dragon God Envoy, you should rest in the Dragon God's celestial palace for a while. Someone will inform you when you are ready to take up your post in the Azure Dragon Hall." The Azure Dragon Hall had lost a large number of troops and needed to adjust for the time being. There wouldn't be any battles. "Alright." Yi Chen faintly nodded. "Elder Yu, bring the Dragon God Envoy to a place to rest. I think it should be in the core region's Red Cloud residence." The Red Cloud residence was a top-notch residence in the Dragon God's celestial palace. The entire residence was covered in big and small arrays. Apart from defense and offense, these arrays could also gather the yuan qi of the heaven and earth. Cultivating inside would yield twice the result with half the effort. Elder Yu brought Yi Chen to the Red Cloud residence and left after drinking a cup of wine with Yi Chen. Before leaving, he assigned some attendants to wait for Yi Chen's orders. "Dragon God Envoy, if you have any orders, don't hesitate to order us." These attendants were all very young. Their cultivation bases were all at the Clasping Yuan realm, and they all looked to be under 30 years old. Of course, this was just their appearance. Be it ordinary sex or 5th grade sex, attendants' positions were all below elders. A portion of them were disciples who didn't have enough talent. Therefore, although they looked to be under 30 years old, they might very well be in their 40s or 50s. "I'm fine now. You can withdraw first," Yi Chen said. "Yes." All attendants walked out of the Red Cloud residence and stood guard outside. After they left, Yi Chen looked around and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Not to mention the Red Cloud residence's luxury and comfort, it occupied several hundred hectares of land. Moreover, on both sides of the road, there was a mid-grade tree every few dozen steps. Some mid-grade trees bore some fruits, and they were all mid-grade fruit. Plucking a fruit, Yi Chen lightly took a bite. Mid-grade fruits are indeed mid-grade fruit. The taste is ample, and the energy it contains is also extremely pure. Eating it every day, year after year, can save a lot of hard work. Moreover, one's constitution will also be much better than ordinary people's. Outside, no one would be so extravagant as to eat mid-grade fruits like ordinary fruit. Even ordinary 5th grade sects couldn't do so. Even in the Dragon God's celestial palace, perhaps only this kind of top-notch residence would have such treatment. If it were anyone else, it would be similarly extravagant, and they would only be able to eat it occasionally. In a situation where there were too many monks and not enough meat, it could only satisfy a small portion of people. In a courtyard not far away there was also a hot spring. Above the hot spring, pure energy transformed into mist. Taking a breath would make one's body feel much more comfortable. As for the entire sky above the Red Cloud residence, it seemed to be shrouded in a layer of special arrays, causing clouds to appear everywhere. Soaking in the hot spring, Yi Chen closed his eyes and lay down on the rock behind him. After a few days, Yi Chen walked out of the Red Cloud residence. The island where the Dragon God's celestial palace is located is not that much smaller than South Rudra region. I'll familiarize myself with the terrain first. Big also had its disadvantages. If one wanted to get to a certain place, it would be rather troublesome. For example, the Red Cloud residence where Yi Chen was staying had no one within several hundred li. There were only a few attendants' palaces and residences. Summoning a beautiful young woman named Yanzi, Yi Chen made her his temporary tour guide. Dragon God Envoy, this is the largest training ground of my Dragon God's celestial palace. Demonic beasts are everywhere, ranging from 1st grade to 6th grade. The surroundings are shrouded in a huge array, and demonic beasts can't come out. Only after reaching 7th grade can they leave the training ground. Yanzi was as beautiful as a flower. Being able to act as a tour guide for Dragon God Envoy made her extremely happy. As attendants, their treatment was not as high as that of inner disciples. Therefore, some resources couldn't go to them, and they could only exchange for some resources with contribution points. However, attendants had their own benefit. They could often receive rewards from people with high positions. In her opinion, serving Yi Chen would definitely be rewarded. Leaving the training ground, the two boarded the palace's exclusive flying artifact, Celestial Palace flying ship, and arrived in front of a huge lake. The lake's water was not transparent, but a kind of crystal color. Above the lake, rainbows could be seen everywhere. The sky was blue without a speck of dust. Even describing it as a paradise of the mortal world wouldn't be enough to describe its beauty. When the two arrived, they happened to see a beautiful woman in palace attire collecting the rainbow essence in a bottle. She looked like a fairy from the heavenly palace. This woman was none other than Dragon God Celestial Palace's 5th disciple, Chen Yusin. Chen Yusin also saw Yi Chen. Putting down what she was doing, her figure flickered and she flew over. Greetings, senior brother Yi. In fact, Chen Yusin was 1 year older than Yi Chen, and also looked older than Yi Chen. However, in terms of strength, calling Yi Chen senior brother wouldn't be an insult to her. Yi Chen smiled. Didn't expect to meet junior sister Chen here. Chen Yusin chuckled and took out a special box from her storage ring, handing it over to Yanzi. There are 3 5-colored thunderbolt bombs here. You can leave first. I'll show senior brother Yi around. Yes. Yanzi's face couldn't help but flash with joy. The 5-colored thunderbolt bombs refined by Chen Yusin were famous enough to kill a powerful astral-reaching expert. Although they weren't as powerful as the 7-colored thunderbolt bomb, they were more than enough for her. Chapter 671. Waiting for Yanzi to leave, Chen Yusin boarded the Dragon Palace flying ship and poured in Zhen Yuan. The ship flew toward the east at a moderate speed. Sister Chen, what's the use of collecting rainbow essences? Yi Chen could tell that the rainbow above the lake was not the rainbow of the mortal world, but formed by different kinds of energies. Some of the particles were clearly formed by the fusion of different kinds of Yuan Qi energies. They could be called astral Qi particles, or even divine light particles. Chen Yusin nodded. The rainbow above the rainbow lake is called the astral Qi rainbow. It is produced by the energy rising from the lake water and the Yuan Qi energy in the sky. The essence of the astral Qi rainbow is the astral Qi particles. Once enough astral Qi particles are collected and refined with special techniques, one can create a 5-colored thunderbolt bomb. The 5-colored thunderbolt bomb can even threaten late astral-reaching realm warriors. If one can collect some divine light particles, one can create a 7-colored thunderbolt bomb, which can kill a Sea of Souls realm warrior at close range. I see. When he was still a condensing reality realm martial artist, Yi Chen had seen Luo Hanshan use the Silver Light Thunderbolt Bomb. The Silver Light Thunderbolt Bomb could easily kill an ordinary clasping Yuan realm martial artist, and this 5-colored Thunderbolt Bomb was at least 10 times more powerful than the Silver Light Thunderbolt Bomb, and the 7-colored Thunderbolt Bomb was at least 100 times more powerful. Senior brother Yi, you haven't seen the explosion of the 5-colored Thunderbolt Bomb, right? It's very beautiful. Chen Yusin took out a 5-colored bead. With a flick of her finger, the 5-colored bead flew out and exploded a kilometer away. A 5-colored brilliance surged out, reflecting thousands of colors under the sunlight. It was different from ordinary thunderbolt bombs. The five-colored thunderbolt bomb didn't produce any obvious shockwaves. It was like an eruption of brilliance. However, the power of this brilliance was very high, and it could ignite some of the nearby origin energy for a long time. It's indeed beautiful. Yi Chen's eyes reflected thousands of colors. Following that, Chen Yusin brought Yi Chen to most of the scenic spots. Due to the limited time and the island was too big, they only picked the most famous ones. Some of the less famous ones, but still many times better than the ones outside, were directly ignored. Senior Brother Yi, this is a rather interesting explosion orchard. It can test one's reaction and insight. Riding on the Dragon Palace flying boat, the two arrived in front of a huge orchard. This orchard was in the shape of a ring, at least 30 miles in diameter. There was a small lake in the middle, which was filled with rich energy. Obviously, it was providing nutrients for the orchard. Inside the orchard, there were countless exploding fruit trees. Yi Chen had heard about exploding fruit trees before. They were a type of low-rank fruit trees, but different from normal fruit trees, they had very little value. Their fruits could only be used to make bombs, but the explosive power was not that great. Even early clasping Yuan realm warriors would not be able to hurt them. Of course, in Yi Chen's world, it would be considered quite powerful and could kill a lot of normal people. How do we test this? Yi Chen asked. Chen Yusin said, the orchard is covered with a soul stone array, which can block soul power detection. Once inside, soul power cannot be released outside. Also, Zhen Yuan is not allowed to be used either. You are only allowed to use your own physical strength to run. After running one lap, whoever returns to the end first will prove who has the better reaction and perception. Soul power can't be released, and Zhen Yuan can't be used? Hearing her, a curious expression appeared on Yi Chen's face. Since he could not use either of them, he had not tested his reaction and observation power yet. It should be known that a person's reaction and observation power were not directly related to Zhen Yuan and soul power, since the latter two could only amplify the other aspects. After all, the physical body and soul were the foundation of a person. Among the core disciples of our Dragon God's Celestial Palace, second senior brother's reaction and perception are the strongest. Moreover, he has the wind spirit body. Even without using Zhen Yuan, his body is as light as a swallow, and his speed is extremely fast. Even eldest senior brother can't compare. Chen Yusin continued. Oh, what about you? Me. Chen Yusin smiled with a trace of pride. I can't compare to second senior brother and eldest senior brother. But in last year's test, I was third. Not bad. Yi Chen faintly nodded. Chen Yusin was the fifth disciple, and being able to rank third meant that she had great potential. If they were in the same realm, she might not lose to the eldest and second disciples. Why don't you go test as well? Chen Yusin suggested. Actually, she had her own plan. She wanted to see how excellent Yi Chen really was, and whether he was just as powerful as his reputation was, or if he was the scariest sword art genius in the whole True Spirit continent, just like Grandpa you had said. Someone is already testing. I'll wait for a while. Yi Chen faintly nodded. Chen Yusin's eyes flickered with a trace of complacency when she saw the other side agreeing. However, when she saw the person testing, she cried out in surprise. It's second senior brother Li Feng. Yi Chen was also sizing up the second disciple of Dragon God's Celestial Palace. Li Feng's appearance was clear, and his eyes were bright like two resplendent diamonds. He was about 28 years old, and wore a cyan-colored leather armor. He had a tall stature, broad shoulders, and long legs. Even though he was clearly standing there, he gave people the impression that he was riding the wind. It was as if his figure could ignore the air resistance with a single movement, tearing through the sky. Second senior brother's result last year was 349 scales. I wonder what it will be this year? He should be able to raise it to within 345 scales. Tisk tsk, worthy of being second senior brother. Even eldest senior brother's result is only 355, while fifth senior sister's is 367. Outside the orchard, a large number of Dragon God's Celestial Palace disciples were gathered together, discussing spiritedly. In front of them was a huge water leak. Below it was a scale of 1,000. At this moment, the water leak had yet to open, so it was 0 scale. "Alright, you guys open the water leak." Li Feng turned his head and instructed. "Yes, second senior brother." One person walked out and opened the water leak. Drip, a stream of water fell. Swish. Almost at the same time, Li Feng's figure flickered as he entered the exploding orchard. The exploding orchard was circular in shape, with both the starting and ending points being the same. As Li Feng entered the orchard, explosions rang out one after another. In a split second there were at least dozens of explosions, which was extremely shocking. According to the source of the explosions, Li Feng was already several li away from the orchard. It was clear that even without using Zhen Yuan, his speed had already surpassed the speed of sound. So fast. Second senior brother's speed seems to be even faster than last year. Chen Yusin exclaimed. Indeed, quite fast. Yi Chen faintly nodded. The two's arrival attracted the majority of people's attention. It's senior sister Chen. Who's the person beside her? How come I've never seen him before? He's actually letting senior sister Chen lead the way. How enviable! In the eastern shallow ocean, Yi Chen's reputation wasn't that great. The number of people who knew him was few and far between. Therefore, the number of disciples who knew Yi Chen was even fewer. At least, no one in front of them knew who Yi Chen was. Of course, if they knew Yi Chen's name, perhaps one or two had heard of him. Greetings, senior sister Chen. Who is he? A few core disciples who had a good relationship with Chen Yusin walked up to greet her and asked. Chen Yusin didn't know how to introduce him, so she could only say, "He's called Yi Chen. He's here to help my Dragon God's Celestial Palace deal with the current situation. You should call him Senior Brother Yi. He's an influential figure in True Spirit Continent, a titled Sword Master." Titled Sword Master? A few people suspiciously glanced at Yi Chen. Regardless of who it was, upon seeing a youth even younger than them being a titled sword master, they would certainly be suspicious. Not saying it out loud was already giving face to Yi Chen. A few people unwillingly called him Senior Brother Yi and retreated. This person is called Yi Chen. Does anyone know him? After retreating, one of them asked his fellow disciples around him about the situation. Yi Chen, I know him. I went to the eastern regions 2 years ago and heard people talk about Yi Chen. It should be him, right? What do you mean? Perhaps you don't know, but the outside world is saying that he's a genius that sect master attaches great importance to. From their tone, it seems like he's even more important than senior brother. Impossible. Senior brother's strength is unquestionable. How could he be stronger than him? He wasn't as strong as senior brother 2 years ago, but I don't know now. That must be a bluff. He wasn't as strong as senior brother 2 years ago. How could he be stronger in 2 years? Moreover, he's a titled sword master. I don't believe it. I don't believe it either. It's definitely self-titled. Let's not talk about this for now. Second senior brother is coming out. The sound of explosions was getting louder and louder. In the end, it almost connected into one, attracting everyone's attention. Swish. After a few blinks of an eye, a figure appeared. It was Dragon God Celestial Palace's second disciple, Li Feng. 340 scales. Too shocking. Seeing Li Feng come out, everyone's gazes focused on the water leak. When they found out that the scale was 340, they all opened their mouths wide in shock. He managed to raise his cultivation by 9 notches in a year. As expected of second senior brother, Li Feng had already seen his own result. The corner of his mouth curled up as he looked at Chen Yusin and Yi Chen and said with a warm smile, Junior sister Qin, you also want to take the test? Qin Yusin shook her head and smiled. I know myself. Compared to last year, I shouldn't have made much progress. However, this senior brother Yi wants to take the test. It's his first time. This is? Li Feng sized up Yi Chen and asked. Chen Yusin once again introduced Yi Chen. Sword Master? A trace of ridicule appeared on Li Feng's face as he said, Your cultivation base at the peak of mid-sea of Soul Realm is indeed not bad. However, the title of Sword Master is not something anyone can bear. If I were you, I would never give myself the title of Sword Master. Yi Chen said, The title of Sword Master is given by others. I merely accepted it. As for whether I can bear the title or not, it's not something you need to worry about. Young and impetuous. Li Feng smiled, his eyes filled with disdain. Chen Yusin saw Li Feng's strange expression and changed the topic. Senior brother Yi, didn't you want to take the test? Let's begin. All right. Yi Chen faintly nodded. Let me remind you, the exploding fruits in the exploding orchard will explode upon sensing life aura. You'd better be slow. Otherwise, when you come out, you'll be naked. Li Feng crossed his arms in front of his chest and said indifferently. Chapter 672. Second senior brother is right. The exploding fruit can sense life from hundreds of meters away. However, each exploding fruit tree will explode in sequence. It's impossible for two exploding fruits to explode at the same time. If you can avoid all of them, you can slow down a little. That way, you will have enough time to react. Chen Yusin didn't want Yi Chen's results to be too bad, so she told him some of the details. Actually, you don't have to tell me. Yi Chen loved challenges and finding his own rules. Before entering a dangerous place, no one would know what was inside. Everything was unknown, and it was precisely because everything was unknown that it could reflect a person's reaction and insight. Li Feng sneered. Junior sister Chen, he doesn't even appreciate your kindness. Why do you need to do this? Perhaps he has the confidence to get a good result? Shut your mouth if you want to find trouble. Yi Chen no longer cared about the mockery from before, but he wasn't a clay figurine. Even if he was, he would still have some anger. Facing Li Feng's aggressiveness, Yi Chen glared at him coldly. His gaze caused Li Feng's body to go numb. He could still think, but he couldn't move his body. It was as if he was being locked on by the most dangerous creature. As long as he moved his body, he would suffer a destructive blow. Junior sister Chen, help me open the drain. Yi Chen said to Chen Yusin. Okay. Chen Yusin was also frightened by Yi Chen. She could faintly feel that Yi Chen was 10 times more terrifying than she had imagined. Just now, Yi Chen was only targeting her second senior brother, Li Feng, but it made her feel as if her life was in danger. This was a subconscious feeling that couldn't be explained. The drain was opened and water began to flow down. Swish! In a flash, Yi Chen turned into a blue light and disappeared into the exploding orchard. His starting speed was even faster than Li Feng's. So fast. Apart from Li Feng and Chen Yusin, the others didn't feel anything strange. They were astonished and furious that Yi Chen dared to tell their second senior brother to shut up. In any case, Li Feng was a disciple of Dragon God's Celestial Palace, while Yi Chen was an outsider. Between the two, they would naturally side with Li Feng. However, when they saw Yi Chen's speed, they were still astonished. What's the point of being fast? The exploding orchard tests one's reaction speed and perception. If you can't do either, being fast will only make you look worse. Not bad, he can come out within 400 scales. I will eat an exploding fruit. 400 scales is already a very good result. If it comes out within 500 scales, I'll eat 2 exploding fruit. You should know that many of us who took the test for the first time achieved more than 1,000 scales. Many disciples discussed among themselves, and most of them were not optimistic about Yi Chen's chances. Bastard! As soon as Yi Chen left, Li Feng immediately recovered from the numbness of his body. He felt that he had lost all face. Being told to shut up in front of Chen Yusen was tantamount to a direct humiliation. What he couldn't accept the most was that he was actually frightened by a single glance from the other party. He couldn't forgive himself no matter what. The extreme humiliation made Li Feng's first thought not of Yi Chen's scariness, but the humiliation he had suffered. He glanced at Chen Yusen and said in a low voice, "Just wait and see. When the result comes out, he will know what it means to court humiliation." Chen Yusen said, "Second senior brother, you don't need to oppose him. No matter what, he is still a genius favored by the sect leader. Junior sister Chen, why are you so partial to him?" Li Feng's face revealed a dissatisfied expression. Chen Yusen sighed. She knew that Li Feng was currently in a fit of anger and wouldn't listen to anything she said. However, she could feel that Yi Chen's reputation wasn't undeserved. He was truly powerful. If it was as Grandpa you had said, second senior brother wouldn't be his opponent no matter what. Pring 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 pring, the sounds of explosions were unceasing, from near to far. Inside the exploding orchard, a faint shadow was shuttling through the flames. Every time he moved, he would travel 1 li. The flames could only chase after him, and couldn't touch his body. And the source of these flames was actually fruit. The fruits were shot out from the trees. Following the trajectory of the flames, one could see that the trees were filled with fruits that looked like honeycombs. They were the size of washbasins, and from those holes, oval-shaped fruits were constantly shooting out. When they encountered powerful air currents or objects, they would immediately explode, creating layers upon layers of flames. Although Yi Chen couldn't release his soul power, his eyes were like an eagle's. The trajectories of the fruits were all imprinted in the depths of his pupils. Then, according to these trajectories, he would quickly calculate the safest path and pass through it with his fastest speed. Rumble! At least 100 fruits shot out from dozens of fruit trees in the surroundings. When they collided, the flames soared into the sky like mushrooms. However, at this critical moment, Yi Chen had already passed through the mushroom-shaped flames. Since he couldn't use Jin Yuan, the flames were only a finger's distance away from burning his clothes. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't catch up. That exploding fruit tree ahead seems to be unusual. There was only one path in the orchard, and it was in the shape of a ring. The starting and ending points of the ring were the same. After running for about 1/3 of the way, an exploding fruit tree that was several times taller than ordinary exploding fruit trees appeared on the left side of the path. The exploding fruits on it were the size of a water jar, and the front was filled with densely packed holes. Each hole was the size of a fist. Puff 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 puff, sensing the life energy, the gigantic exploding fruit tree shot out fist-sized, oval-shaped fruits one after another. Although it was done in an orderly manner, the speed at which it shot out was too fast. One after another, they brought along a white wave of air. "It's too dense. I can't go through it directly." Yi Chen didn't slow down. He pulled out the gold sword from his waist and waved it countless times. At least a dozen fruits were cut in half. Although he couldn't use Jin Yuan, with the absolute speed of his sword, it was impossible for the fruits to touch Yi Chen. A pile of fruits that had been cut in half fell on the ground, but they didn't explode. Yi Chen's figure flickered as he passed through the rest of the exploding fruit trees. This exploding fruit orchard indeed has a set. Although it's only used to test reaction and perception, it still feels like a large-scale battle. In Yi Chen's eyes, the exploding fruit trees on both sides were like enemies. They wanted to attack him, and all he had to do was evade their attacks and reach the destination. It seemed simple, but once one got used to it, one's survivability would increase imperceptibly in a large-scale battle. Sometimes, even if one was scared stiff, one's body would subconsciously move. Yi Chen's guess wasn't wrong. The exploding fruit orchard's true purpose was to let the disciples of Dragon God's celestial palace adapt to large-scale battles and increase their survivability. This was something every fifth-grade sect had to do. After all, large-scale battles were completely different from ordinary ones. Yi Chen's speed was extremely fast, and he didn't seem to slow down at all. When he was only a dozen li away from the destination, the rumbling sound of explosions reached everyone's ears. How is this possible? It's only 300 scales. He's actually a lot faster than second senior brother. They're not on the same level at all. Hearing the sound getting closer and closer, some people couldn't help but look at the scale. Immediately, they were all stupefied. Li Feng's face turned black as he tightly clenched his fists. Beside him, Chen Yusin sucked in a breath of cold air. She originally thought that in Yi Chen's first test, a passable result would already be pretty good. But how could she have imagined that not only was Yi Chen's result good, it even surpassed second senior brother's? According to the source of the sound, he would probably reach the destination after a few more scales and break second senior brother's record. Just as he expected, Yi Chen came out when the scale of the water hourglass reached 305. The sound of people sucking in breaths resounded. 305 scales. Could it be that he didn't slow down at all? Impossible. If he didn't slow down, how could he pass through the net of exploding fruit trees? His whole body would be blown away. Clamorous discussions broke out. Senior brother Yi, you've created a new record, 305 scales. Chen Yusin stared blankly for a moment, then greeted him with a smile. Yi Chen said, not bad, this exploding fruit orchard does have some tricks. Chen Yusin smiled bitterly. Only Yi Chen thought that the exploding fruit orchard had some trick. They had given it their all, not daring to relax in the slightest. Haha, what a shameless fellow. Right at this moment, Li Feng's voice rang out. Yi Chen's eyes turned cold as he looked at Li Feng. What did you say? I said you're shameless. Li Feng sneered. In order to win, you actually use Zhen Yuan in the exploding fruit orchard. So what if you win? Hearing these words, many disciples suddenly understood. That's right. Without using Zhen Yuan, how could he reach the finish line with only 305 scales? Immediately after, many people looked at Yi Chen in a different light. The exploding orchard only restricted soul power, not Zhen Yuan. Not allowing the use of Zhen Yuan was only an artificial restriction. Of course, in the past, no disciple of Dragon God's Celestial Palace would use Zhen Yuan for the sake of a good result. After all, one's reaction speed, perception, and speed were all well known. Once upon a time, a disciple of Dragon God's Celestial Palace used Zhen Yuan. Later on, it was discovered, and he was despised by everyone. Gradually, he was isolated. From then on, no one dared to do so again. However, Yi Chen was an outsider, so he might use Zhen Yuan. You have to take responsibility for your words. Yi Chen's voice was cold. Chen Yusin said anxiously, second senior brother. Li Feng coldly said, junior sister Chen, you're still speaking up for him. He's clearly cheating. Whether I'm cheating or not, you'll know very soon. Do you dare to take one move from me? Yi Chen decided to give his opponent an unforgettable lesson, letting him know the immensity of heaven and earth. After cheating, you're angry from shame? Alright, I'll take one move from you. Let's see what you can do to me. Although he said so, Li Feng didn't dare to look down on Yi Chen. Before Yi Chen took the test, he still remembered that glance. Therefore, he planned to go all out and make Yi Chen speechless. He didn't believe that he couldn't even take one move from Yi Chen. It should be known that even his eldest senior brother wouldn't dare to say he could win in one move. Senior brother Yi, be lenient. Chen Yusin knew that Yi Chen was furious. She vaguely felt that this time, her second senior brother would suffer miserably. She could only hope that Yi Chen wouldn't be too ruthless. Chen Yusin's words were still fine, but the moment she spoke, Li Feng immediately flew into a rage. He drew his long blade and glared at Yi Chen with killing intent. Chapter 673. I know what I'm doing, Yi Chen said indifferently. Come, Yi Chen. Li Feng was already prepared. Circulating his Zhen Yuan to the limit, the long blade was covered in a layer of green light. Holding it in his hand, it felt light as if it was weightless. Yi Chen didn't draw his sword. Instead, he walked toward Li Feng step by step. The distance between each step was the same, as if he had measured it with a ruler. His gaze was looking down on Li Feng, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll in a courtyard, unhindered by rain or shine, as if he was taking the enemy's head amidst thousands of soldiers and horses. Arrogant! Li Feng was infuriated by Yi Chen. The latter didn't draw his sword, nor did he take any stance. Instead, he just walked toward him. Could it be that he thought he was a fish on the chopping block? Polar wind killing blade. With a flicker of blade light, Li Feng directly pounced toward Yi Chen. The weightless long blade in his hand transformed into a green light screen. As the long blade danced, the surrounding dust and gravel were drawn over, as if two magnetic fields had gathered on the blade. When fighting with the enemy would be involuntarily pulled toward the blade, walking right into the trap. By relying on the uniqueness of the polar wind killing blade, Li Feng had defeated several masters with similar strength. This time, facing Yi Chen, he didn't hope to win. Instead, he hoped to remain undefeated and even make the latter suffer a little. Facing second senior brother, he actually didn't draw his sword. It's too late now, the spectating disciples said inwardly. Chen Yusin's brows creased. No one knew what she was thinking. Puff! A shocking scene occurred. Facing Li Feng's powerful blade, Yi Chen unexpectedly extended his index finger and pointed. It wasn't void-shattering finger, but a pure finger. However, this finger contained a frightening destruction sword intent. Although Li Feng's long blade was inconceivably fast, it couldn't escape from this finger and was directly pointed at the center of the blade. Pung! A huge force was transmitted through the saber to Li Feng's wrist. Suddenly, the saber flew out of his hand and spun in the air. In the next moment, Yi Chen instantly appeared in front of Li Feng. His finger pierced through Li Feng's protective Zhen Yuan like a hot knife through butter, ruthlessly pressing on his armor. Creak! The sound of metal twisting rang out. Li Feng vomited a mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground. The green leather armor on his chest was completely shattered, and the inner armor had a clear finger print on it. The edges of the armor were slightly twisted. Li Feng suffered a crushing defeat with a single finger. Looking down at Li Feng from above, Yi Chen said indifferently, "You can't even block a single finger of mine. What qualifications do you have to question me?" The disciples of Dragon God's celestial palace were stupefied. Chen Yusin was stunned. As strong as second senior brother was, he could not even block one of Yi Chen's fingers. With one finger, the saber flew out and second senior brother fell to the ground. That feeling was like an adult poking a toddler who had just learned to walk. The toddler fell to the ground unwillingly, unable to resist. Second senior brother was struck down by a single finger? Is this true? This. How powerful is he exactly? Without drawing his sword, he defeated second senior brother with a single finger, and in one strike? At this moment, the disciples of Dragon God's celestial palace were replaying a scene in their minds. Yi Chen leisurely strolling toward Li Feng. Under Li Feng's all-out attack, a single finger strike sent the saber flying and struck Li Feng's chest. Li Feng spurted a mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground. Chen Yusin covered her small mouth and let out a kitten-like whimper. Too powerful! Terrifyingly powerful! Grandpa Yu was right. In true spirit continent, he's a genius who stands above everyone. Even in Eastern Shallow Ocean, no one can compare to him. In front of him, we must be as childish as children, always thinking ourselves infallible. In Chen Yusin's eyes, Yi Chen's body seemed to be shining with radiance. It was so dazzling and eye-catching, like a sun god looking down on the second senior brother. Meanwhile, the second senior brother had already returned to his original form, looking like a firefly under the sun, dim and insignificant like a speck of dust. The gap is too big. Chen Yusin's gaze toward Yi Chen unknowingly carried a trace of worship. Even she herself didn't notice it. Impossible, this is impossible. Li Feng still couldn't believe that he had been defeated by a single finger. It was as if he was in a dream, a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Subconsciously looking around, he saw the dumbstruck expressions of the disciples of Dragon God's celestial palace and Chen Yusin looking at Yi Chen with worship in her eyes. Li Feng's lifeless expression gradually recovered, replaced by shame, anger, and resentment. His face had turned the color of a pig's liver, and the exclamations around his ears sounded like insults again and again. Yi Chen, you're going too far. Li Feng roared. Yi Chen coldly looked at him. I warned you to shut your mouth from the very beginning, unless you want to look for trouble. Unfortunately, you didn't take it seriously. You have only yourself to blame for falling into this state. What does it have to do with me? You're the one who brought this upon yourself. Bastard. Using his right palm as a blade, Li Feng chopped at Yi Chen. This palm contained his anger, and its might wasn't much weaker than when he used a blade. Unfortunately, Li Feng's movements were too slow for Yi Chen. Yi Chen only needed to hit the opponent before the latter could hit him. But, not being polite at all, Yi Chen slapped Li Feng's forehead, directly knocking him out. Yi Chen would never show any mercy to this kind of person who didn't know what was good for him. Showing mercy was the same as slapping his own face. Let's go. After doing all this, Yi Chen turned his head and said to Chen Yusin. Faintly nodding, Chen Yusin instructed a few disciples, You guys, quickly bring second senior brother to rest. Before leaving, she helplessly glanced at the fainted Li Feng, then stealthily glanced at Yi Chen, thinking to herself, Senior brother Yi looks very calm, but that's only when he's not angry. When he's angry, he's even more frightening than eldest brother. Riding the flying ship, the two turned around and flew into the distance. Only after the two left did the disciples dare to walk over and help Li Feng up. Second brother kicked an iron plate this time, provoking a fiend that he can't afford to provoke. Too frightening. Defeating second brother with one finger and knocking him out with one slap. Say, when second brother wakes up, will he go crazy? Don't talk so much. Honestly, I don't think second brother can do anything to Yi Chen. Blindly finding trouble with him will only make things worse. Although they didn't know much about Yi Chen, they had already listed Yi Chen as someone who couldn't be provoked. In the following days, Yi Chen didn't calm down and cultivate. It wasn't that he was slacking off, but in fact, he was already in a state where it was hard for him to make any progress. In terms of Zhen Yuan, his cultivation base was at the peak of mid-Sea of Soul Realm. If he wanted to reach late Sea of Soul Realm, he would need a long time, at least a year and a half, and at most 3 to 5 years. In terms of profound martial skills, apart from Golden Hurricane, all his other profound martial skills had reached perfection. However, Golden Hurricane was a fusion of profound martial skills, and each step forward was extremely difficult. It should be known that perfection of Golden Hurricane was a high-grade profound martial skill, something that only Life and Death Kings could comprehend. Wanting to comprehend it with a cultivation base of Sea of Soul Realm was naturally extremely difficult. Only a freak like Yi Chen could comprehend Golden Hurricane to 30 to 40%. In terms of Sword Soul, Destruction Sword Soul was already at the 5th step. Wanting to raise it further would be insatiable and unrealistic. As for Immortal Sword Soul, it required an opportunity, which couldn't be rushed. As for Defensive Sword Art, the second layer was already invincible. Yi Chen needed to consolidate his foundation and couldn't rush to breakthrough. On this day, Elder Yu suddenly came looking for Yi Chen, saying that he would bring Yi Chen to the treasury. On the way, Yi Chen told Elder Yu about teaching Li Feng a lesson. It wasn't that he felt he was being excessive, but he wanted Elder Yu to understand the situation, lest something unpleasant happened. Elder Yu smiled, so be it. He deserved it. You being lenient is already giving him a lot of face. Elder Yu didn't take this matter to heart. In fact, even if he had some thoughts, what could he do? Yi Chen was a dragon god envoy, and his status was even higher than great elders. Soon, the two arrived at Dragon God Celestial Palace's treasury. The management of the treasure vault was very strict. Even Elder Yu needed the Grand Elder's permission to enter. Entering the treasury, Yi Chen saw an astonishing number of artifacts. The treasury had a total of 4 floors. The first floor had low-grade artifacts, the second floor had mid-grade artifacts, and the third floor had upper-grade artifacts. The fourth floor didn't have any extreme-grade artifacts, and only had 7-8 semi-extreme-grade artifacts, as well as a few special upper-grade artifacts. You don't lack semi-extreme-grade artifact. This time, I brought you here to let you choose a chariot upper-grade artifact. Elder Yu brought Yi Chen to a few chariots. Chariot? Sizing up the chariots before him, Yi Chen was somewhat astonished. This was the first time he had seen a chariot artifact. Elder Yu said, ordinary sects compete in numbers and experts. However, 5th grade sects compete not only in numbers and experts, but also in other things. This chariot artifact was very popular in ancient times. A chariot can hold dozens of people, and if driven by Zhen Yuan, a protective cover will appear around the chariot, allowing the user to charge out. Of course, small-scale battles usually don't use chariots. I'm letting you choose a chariot just in case. Yi Chen's reputation as a dragon god envoy wasn't undeserved. If possible, Dragon God Celestial Palace would satisfy Yi Chen. Unfortunately, Yi Chen's battle strength was too high, and he didn't lack anything. Even a 5th grade sect couldn't give him too many useful things. Even if they gave him an extreme grade artifact, Yi Chen wouldn't be able to use it. Which one? Elder Yu asked. Without much hesitation, Yi Chen said, I'll take this one. Elder Yu followed Yi Chen's gaze and praised, good eyesight. This chariot is the best one, and the material is also very hard. The chariot Yi Chen had chosen was a dragon-headed chariot. The entire chariot was 10 meters long and 4 meters wide, with a total of 4 wheels. The wheels were covered with arm-thick spikes, engraved with golden-veined patterns. One could easily imagine how many people would be crushed to death by the wheels of the chariot. The bottom of the chariot and its surroundings were coiled by a huge golden dragon. The dragon's head was at the front of the chariot, and its mouth was tightly shut as if it could open at any time. The dragon's eyes were 2 huge red gems, giving off a cold, merciless, and bloody aura. Elder Yu said, this chariot is called Golden Dragon Chariot. Under the activation of Zhen Yuan, the dragon's head can open and spurt out blazing flames. Of course, you don't have to pour your Zhen Yuan. You can let others do it. Letting Yi Chen pour his Zhen Yuan would be a waste of Yi Chen's Zhen Yuan. It should be known that any casual attack of Yi Chen's was terrifying beyond belief. Chapter 674. Although the Golden Dragon War Chariot was only an upper-grade war chariot artifact, its effect far surpassed other semi-extreme grade artifacts. Just think about it, inside the war chariot was equivalent to having an extra layer of protection. Moreover, it was not just one person but dozens of people. On the battlefield, an extra layer of protection was equivalent to an extra life, greatly increasing the chances of survival and the number of enemies they could kill. Not to mention ordinary experts, even an expert at the level of Yi Chen couldn't ignore the attacks of dozens of people. If he tried to resist, he would be courting death. Putting away the Golden Dragon War Chariot, the two left the treasury. Dragon God Envoy, we can set off in 3 days. At that time, there will be several core disciples and dozens of inner sect disciples following you. If possible, try to protect 1 or 2. Elder Yu was very clear about how frightening Yi Chen, who had defeated Li Feng with a single finger, was. Even the Great Elder had said that Yi Chen's strength was not below his. With Yi Chen's protection, surviving 1 or 2 shouldn't be a problem. I'll try my best. Yi Chen nodded. Just try your best. This is a bottle of upper cleansing pellet. It can rapidly restore your Zhen Yuan with minimal side effect. Great Elder asked me to give it to you. Elder Yu took out a deep blue bottle from his storage ring and handed it over to Yi Chen. Taking over the bottle, Yi Chen opened the stopper and put his nose close to it. All of a sudden, an aroma that could make Zhen Yuan boil filled his nostrils. This was a bottle of semi-extreme rank pellets, which had very little side effects. In the market, pellets of this rank could not be sold at all. Only rank 5 martial schools would have them. Even then, they would only have a limited supply, which was extremely rare. Good pellet. Yi Chen put it away without any trace of politeness. 3 days later, early morning, Yi Chen arrived at the departure point, a majestic palace. On the roof of the palace, there was a statue of a flying dragon, which looked majestic and majestic. This hall was the teleportation hall, and it was connected to the 5 halls. Of course, unless it was a special situation, it was rare to see a single hall being teleported. After all, the teleportation stone door consumed top-grade spirit stones. Top-grade spirit stones were very precious even in a rank 5 martial school, and one used meant one less. Normally, only a certain number of people would be able to teleport. Entering the palace, Yi Chen saw 5 conveyor gates in front of him. These 5 conveyor gates were much larger than ordinary ones. They were 10 meters wide and 20 meters tall, and could instantly transport dozens to 100 people. On the left side of the first conveyor gate were all the members of Elders Association. On the right side were a dozen young disciples of Dragon God's Celestial Palace. Among them was the 5th disciple, Chen Yusin. Dragon God Envoy. The first elder nodded. Yi Chen asked, "Are we leaving now?" "If there's nothing else, Dragon God Envoy, we can set off now." "In that case, let's go." "All right." The first elder cleared his throat and said to Chen Yusin and the other disciples, "This operation will be led by Dragon God Envoy. You have to listen to him. If you don't, you'll be punished according to sect rules. Let's go together now." The conveyor gate was very wide. Dozens of people walking side by side didn't feel crowded at all. At the moment of teleportation, the first elder's voice reached Yi Chen's ears. "Dragon God Envoy, I'll leave everything to you." Yi Chen's figure was already halfway into the whirlpool, and his faintly discernible voice came back. "Don't worry, wait for the good news." Buzz. The whirlpool fiercely revolved, and the figures of Yi Chen and the others completely disappeared. Outside the conveyor gate, Elder Yu sighed. "I hope they can return safely. Even if they fail, it doesn't matter." "Don't say such depressing words. If they fail, the chances of them returning safely are very small. We can only wish them success." "That's right, success is imminent." Not only did the teleportation gate in the teleportation hall look different from ordinary teleportation gates, but the details of teleportation were also different. Teleportation through ordinary teleportation gates was like entering a colorful passageway. Teleportation through the teleportation hall's teleportation gate was the same. However, the person being teleported through was enveloped in a bubble of primal chaos. Inside the bubble, the person could freely speak. "Senior Brother Yi, this is my eldest senior brother Lin Songhai, and this is 8th junior brother Luo Yunsong." Chen Yusin introduced the 2 core disciples to Yi Chen. The one on the right had ordinary looks, but he was very young, looking gentle and elegant. The one on the left was much colder, expressionless, and a pair of cold star-like eyes flickered with a cold light, like 2 rays of sword chi, extremely aggressive, giving people a feeling that their sharpness was too strong, and they couldn't suppress it no matter what. "Senior Brother Yi." The gentle Luo Yunsong nodded toward Yi Chen. He had already heard about Yi Chen defeating second senior brother Li Feng, and he admired Yi Chen a lot. Now that Yi Chen was already the Dragon God Envoy of Dragon God's Celestial Palace, and was about to become the deputy of Azure Dragon Hall, calling Yi Chen senior brother Yi couldn't be more normal. "Junior brother Luo." Yi Chen returned the greeting with a faint smile. Yi Chen. Lin Songhai raised his eyelids and looked at Yi Chen. He didn't call Yi Chen senior brother Yi. As the head disciple of Dragon God's celestial palace, it was impossible for him to call someone else senior brother, even if Yi Chen's position was higher than his. Chen Yusin and Luo Yunsong both felt that this was normal, and so did Yi Chen. Otherwise, he wouldn't be used to being called senior brother. After all, Luo Yunsong and Chen Yusin were about the same age as him. On the other hand, Lin Songhai was much older than him, and was about the same age as the top 5 young tycoons. Yi Chen looked at Lin Songhai. Li Feng's skill is not good enough. I've let you see a joke. Lin Songhai's tone changed as he said, however, as his senior brother, I have to seek justice for him. Of course, I won't act rashly. With my style, I won't do such a reckless thing. Therefore, you can rest assured that I won't look for trouble with you. It's best if you think like this. Yi Chen knew a few things about Lin Songhai. If he was the sword master of True Spirit Continent, then Lin Songhai was one of the strongest candidates for the sword master of Eastern Shallow Ocean. Among sword artists, no one could compare to him. Lin Songhai continued, however, on the battlefield, I personally won't listen to orders. Moreover, Li Feng's justice cannot be denied. How about this, we'll decide based on the number of kills. Whoever kills more will have the right to speak. Do you dare to compete with me? Competing based on the number of kills? Yi Chen faintly smiled and said noncommittally, I don't care whether you listen or not, but if it affects others, even if you're the head disciple, I have the right to arrest you. I hope you understand this point. As for the number of kills, you can compete if you want. I don't care. So, you agree? Lin Songhai faintly creased his brows. Yi Chen's attitude made him somewhat dissatisfied. It seemed like the latter didn't take this matter too seriously. Let's just say so. Yi Chen didn't want to argue on this matter. Head disciple wants to compete with senior brother Yi on the number of kills. Chen Yusin and Luo Yunsong exchanged glances. They were somewhat looking forward to the scene. It would certainly be a shocking and spectacular sight. As for who would win and who would lose, they had no idea.